I, yes, I can now.
Oh, good, good, excellent.
Now, where is Chad?
Oh, let's see. Oh, you're in
I see-
Hawaii?
I see Mac's picture. Sorry.
Yeah, oh, this is the same problem as I had before, maybe. Hey, Jake, could you come here a minute, please?
Yes, I can.
I need you to set up my video again. I'm clicking it and it's just not turning it on.
It looks like something's happening, Mac.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Oh, okay, you can see it. Okay.
Alan?
How are you?
Yeah.
Alan,
see me or
you
All right,
are,
hold on one second.
you're sort of half on, half off.
Hey, Jake.
So, yeah, it's much better.
Okay.
So Alan McHugh, you are on. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yep, great.
I'm on.
Okay.
So Mac,
I would just suggest, just technically, that unless you're speaking, to mute your mic, because otherwise, if you shuffle papers or do something where the mic picks up the sound,
That's me.
video will go to your camera.
Hi,
The,
John.
Actually, if you mute, you won't be able to speak unless the host unclicks your mic each time. But if everyone's quiet, it won't be a problem.
No, you can, no, you can unmute yourself. At the top, well, I have an iPad, but at the top of the
Yeah.
iPad has a
Top
mic.
right.
Watch, I'll do it right
Okay, what is
now. Now I'm unmuted.
video?
So you can do it yourself. The bar at the top.
That's her.
And Brian, I've used your technology.
Very good. I just thought you were actually there.
Unfortunately, I was there a month ago. It's the Bahamas.
It's a little cold outside here, but it's not bad.
Why are you at the back of the keep? Are you just coming out of being incarcerated?
Yes,
There.
Yeah, there you go.
Can you guys see me?
I was quarantined.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, okay, good. All right, so let's see, what time do we have? Okay.
9:01.
All right, thank you. It's 9:01. I would like to call this special meeting to order, and let's rise for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag
flag,
Of the United States of America,
and
to the republic
Republic,
which stands one nation, under God,
indivisible,
Indivisible, liberty,
liberty, and justice for all.
Thank you. Debbie, are you with us today?
Do you want me
Okay.
to text her to get her on, David?
No,
Yeah,
she's on. She's
yeah,
on.
her, it doesn't look like she has audio, but or
Okay,
she's
so
muted.
I'll do roll call. Trustee McHugh,
Present.
Trustee Deluck,
Present?
Trustee Cohn,
Here?
Trustee Barnett,
Here.
and we're also joined by our attorney, Brian Nugent. Okay, so let
And
me,
also, Mac,
And my
John,
associate, John Colasar, is here too.
hi, John, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
This is within our normal fee structure, is it?
That is correct. This is,
All right.
letting John get out of his, virtually out of his isolation there.
Oh, gosh.
Got past his bed this time.
Yes.
All right, so I just wanted to welcome anybody that's listening today, and thank the residents in the village, employees, for cooperating under these guidelines that have been put out by the state. It's really important to be vigilant, and we all know what Orange County is a hotspot. And if there is anyone here that would like to ask me any questions about this COVID-19, you're welcome to ask, but it doesn't look like anybody is on. So we'll move on. I think this is you, Paul, lake discussion, lake management.
Certainly, thank you. So just to put this in context and a framework, we all remember that at the end of 2018, we, in conjunction with the Lakes Committee, did a search for a lakes manager, interviewed a number of them, and hired Northeast Aquatic Research. And during the course of 2020, NAIR did a fairly rigorous program of testing and analysis on all three lakes, with a charge to develop some recommendations for aquatic plant management and and water quality. We've all seen the report on aquatic plant management. The water quality report is supposed to be released imminently. But what we did is took the recommendations from NEAR, went out to 3 vendors, actually 4 vendors, 3 dash harvesters and 1 herbicide applier. One of the dash harvesters declined to furnish pricing, but you've also see a sort of a matrix of the different recommended aquatic plant management mitigations and what they cost. The recommendations were for Tuxedo Lake to engage in a herbicide application.
Paul, can I just be clear, just so whoever's listening in, be clear, this is our Lakes manager recommendation. This is neither the trustees nor the Lakes Committee necessarily recommendation.
That is correct. NEAR.
Okay.
NEAR's recommendations. For Tuxedo Lake, well, in terms of all lakes, there are essentially 2 possible ways to mitigate aquatic plants, and this is principally Eurasian water milfoil, and that is through dash harvesting or herbicide. Their recommendation on Tuxedo Lake was to manage that initially through herbicide, Procelicor. NEAR felt that dash was not cost effective at the level of an infestation on Tuxedo Lake. That's just shy of 40 acres of Eurasian water milfoil. While dash might be suitable for follow-on maintenance after that initial herbicide mitigation. For pond number 3, their recommendation was for, again, a herbicide for the majority portion of the lake, in conjunction with some harvesting at the south end of the lake where the water is shallow and it spills through more frequently. For Weewa, the recommendation was for dash harvesting, since the areas there are not very numerous and are not very dense. Although it should be pointed out that in the Weewa is probably the area of greatest danger, because particularly if milfoil is left unattended there, it can spread, and it can subject to some risk of fragmentation from the other lakes. So the final piece of their recommendation is essentially to put in some booms on Tuxedo Lake and pond number 3 to prevent fragmentation from those lakes going downstream into the other lakes. Those were their recommendations. They're obviously the question of herbicide in our lakes, and particularly our reservoir, is a little controversial, maybe a lot controversial. So that is something that we probably need to factor into our conversation today. One approach that could be taken here is to utilize a herbicide in either a test area on Tuxedo Lake or in pond number 3, which is actually the NEAR's recommendation, and spend some time over the next year developing a better education both for ourselves and the community, to understand the implications of Procelicor on our lake. So that is the background. That is their recommendation. I think what, at least what I'm looking for here today is kind of a direction from the board on which way they would like Alan and I to pursue carrying this out. Alan, is that anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair characterization. I mean, I guess my one qualifier is I think we have maybe it would be good if we kind of put this in dollars and cents numbers and kind of framed it that way on, what we did provisionally in the budget was we put 150K, of which 100K was coming from the general fund, and 50K was coming from the general fund, 100K was coming from the water fund. And then if we kind of walk back, Paul, we've got near fees are 50K for the upcoming fiscal year, agreed?
Yes. Well,
And
that's,
then I'm just trying to frame it out. So if we took 50K for near, if we adopted the recommendation of the lakes manager with regard to pond number 3, we're talking a 10K expense using Procelicor, is that correct?
no, I think if you were going to adopt the recommendations of the lakes manager, you would have about a $7,500 expense for the northern end of pond 3, and you would add to that about $6,000 or $7,000 depending on your vendor for hand harvesting the southern end of pond 3. So you'd have about $14,000.
That's if we do the hybrid approach versus doing the full lake of Procelicor.
Correct. But the full lake of Procelicor was not the lakes manager's recommendation.
Okay, so we got 14K there. We've got the boom curtains that we just discussed. That's what, 5K, just to make, just to get round figures moving this thing forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we got 5K boom curtains. And then that's assuming, so we've got 64, rounding up, we've got a 70K base case. That's ignoring doing anything on Tuxedo Lake, ignoring doing anything on the Weewah, correct?
Well,
I'm not splitting hairs. I'm just trying to frame it because I think it needs to be framed in dollar amounts because
I don't disagree. I'm just trying to convert the numbers you're using with another set of numbers here. But yes, let's go.
All right. So with regard to Weewah, we're talking about doing spot dash harvesting, one for Eurasian water milfoil and secondly for coontail. And what kind of order of magnitude do you want to put, 5 or 10K there?
Well, the Weewah harvesting, we have quotes for water milfoil for $10,000 or $11,000.
Okay, so let's just use base case. We'll use 10K there just to make so. And then Tuxedo Lake is the colossal question mark. But the benefit of Tuxedo Lake is that's going in the general versus that's going in the water fund rather than the general fund. So then the question is, if we looked at the near 50K, are we saying 2/3 Tuxedo Lake, 1/3 the other 2 bodies of water, or do we do a third, a third, a third?
You sort of, I would say probably half and half is probably more accurate.
Okay, so let's drop that down. So we got 25K for pond 3 in the Weewah with our lakes manager, plus 14K for pond 3. So we're at 39, plus 3K for the boom curtains. So we're at 42. Then we've got 10 for the Weewah. So we're coming out around 50K is basically what we're coming around to on that number.
I just joined the meeting.
Yeah, I just
sorry
wanted
for-
everybody to understand how we came up with the 50K. That's what I've been, this excruciating exercise has been.
Yes.
I
Okay.
just joined the meeting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so I guess to Paul's point, does anybody have any questions with regard to the recommendations from our lake manager with regard to Pond 3 and the Weewa? Let's narrow the scope and then we can go on to the Tuxedo Lake discussion.
So
David,
Sorry, I came in
David,
late.
yeah.
Mayor, you're on mute, Mayor. Mayor, you're muted.
I don't see Max on the screen. Oh, there he is. Yeah.
I see him, but his microphone's off. Mayor, if you can, oh,
Okay,
there you
we
go.
So I just wanted to welcome Jim Hayes to the meeting. And we are, good timing. Paul just gave a presentation on what the lake managers have recommended. And Alan has added some numbers to it. And we're now debating that. So I'll turn the floor back over to Alan. I believe I cut you off. I apologize.
No, we couldn't hear you. Jim, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
All right.
Okay. All right. So Alan, I think you wanted to go starting with Pond 3 and Weewa.
Yeah, Jim, what we were just doing was we were talking about how much we'd allocated in the budget for lakes management, or what we're, allocated, and which was 150K, of which 100 was coming from the water department, 50 from the general fund. And then what we did was did a deep dive on looking at the lakes manager's recommendation for Pond number 3 and the Weewa and the dollar cost associated with that, which is, if we take AJ's recommendation at face value and do that, we're talking around a $50K expense.
All right.
Now we got, Jim's disappeared.
So,
No,
There he is.
You see me? Okay.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
see you now.
Okay. Good.
so can I ask a question, Alan? And Paul, just to make sure I got it correctly. So the 50K is the Weewa and Pond 3. Weewa is dash harvesting for Cottontail and EWM. Pond 3 is, I thought I heard use of Priscillacor. Is that correct?
That is Neer's recommendation, correct.
And that's what the 50,000 relates to.
That's a component of the 50,000, correct.
Yes, thank you.
Were you,
And-
just to frame it the same, to follow through on Alan's framing, were you to go on Pond 3 dash harvesting rather than Priscillacor, that would be an additional, depending on your vendor again, either rather than the 14,000, that would be 22,000 approximately for New England Aquatic.
Okay. And just, I'm going to throw one other thing in, because David asked about it at the last meeting when we were discussing the sewer main expense on the east side of Pond 3, or going by that. We did get, we spoke to our lakes manager with regard to that, to set up a testing facility where we could do it weekly. It's $35 for E. coli test sample. He doesn't think it's a concern, but in terms of good practices and methods, we are setting that up. So the test itself is $35. There'll be, and our DPW can do the sample. Then we just take the sample the same day down to the Marlborough testing facility. We get a result the following day. So we will start monitoring that issue, which I know is a concern of yours, David.
That's great.
May I say something at this point?
Yeah, sure,
Hello?
please.
Yeah. In terms of the time and expense, from the Lake Committee's point of view, we're concerned very much about the long-term expense of this management of all 3 lakes. And the record of herbicides in terms of killing the plants is uncertain. The record of killing the plants by pulling is does work. You don't always get every piece of the plant, so it doesn't mean that every time you pull up something, you've got it all and it will be gone. But there are efforts, there are examples, particularly Upper Saranac Lake in the Adirondacks, where pulling has been successful. From our point of view, the long-term goal, one of the long-term goals the board might have is to reduce the annual cost of managing the Eurasian water milfoil. And in order to do that, you really have to beat it back. Procelicor at this point is a new herbicide, and its long-term effectiveness at killing the plants is not known. It may do it, but we don't know that it will do it. So I think in your thinking on this, we would urge you to think about ways that you actually can reduce the infestation in all three lakes, not just knock it back for a year or two or three, and then have to keep exerting the same expense. Upper Saranac Lake is now, after a lot of money was spent up front, I agree, it's very expensive up front, but they're down to about $100 per acre. So we could conceivably, with time, be able to beat it back so that the annual expense is relatively manageable. That will, I mean, you'll always have to treat all three lakes. That's never going to go away. And they're going to have to be treated for milfoil really just about every year. But we think at this point that the pulling is more effective at beating it back, but we don't know about Procelicor. I mean, we just don't know about that. But that's our position. So we would advocate pulling at this point over herbicides. We're not 100% against herbicides, but we think at this point it's more reliable as a way of beating back the milfoil than is the herbicide. That's all.
May I ask Jim a question?
Yeah.
Jim, to help me understand sort of the difference in opinions, as I understood it, the lake's manager suggested herbicide in testing it in Pond 3 or corner of Tuxedo Lake. Well,
he gave either or in Pond 3, either dash or herbicides. He did not come down for herbicides. He said you could either do dash or herbicides.
So
in Pond 3.
Just in terms of accuracy here, if I could interject, I do believe the recommendation in NIR's report is that in Pond 3, herbicide is favored both in terms of control and cost over dash pulling. Although he said you could go either way, but but NIR's recommendation is for Procelicor as a favored means of more effective means of control. I mean, that's their recommendation. Whether, obviously there are other factors that bear into that.
Sure, but that's what okay. So basically, NIR is recommending, Paul, use of Procelicor in Pond 3 as being as the most effective, is what you just said. So what, Jim? So I'm confused about the difference of opinion. I mean, we chose the lake's manager as a professional and expert in this area, I think, with everybody's concurrence. So I'm just confused about why the lakes committee is not, doesn't support that recommendation, or is contradicting that recommendation.
Well, we don't say that the lake manager is necessarily wrong. We don't think that. We don't know that. But I think, for quick results, the herbicide is the best, but we don't know its lasting effects. And other herbicides have not proved to be effective in killing the plants. And that's the ultimate goal, is to kill them. and to reduce the number of plants in the lake. That's all. This is just another, we're not trying to go against the lake manager's recommendation. This is just adding something to the discussion. And maybe this is not the place to do it, but I'm doing it now anyway.
No, I think it's useful. But let me just follow up question on that. So has the Lakes Committee, what I hear you saying, and tell me if I'm getting this correctly, is that you don't disagree with the Lakes manager's recommendation of using the herbicide in Pond 3 for an immediate impact, but the Lakes Committee's view is that there's uncertainty as regarding the long-term effectiveness of the herbicide versus dash harvesting.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Has the Lakes Committee's concerns and discussions, concerns been discussed with the Lakes manager, and have they given a response to you guys, or has it not been discussed yet with the Lakes manager?
I did discuss this with the lake manager, and maybe the discussion wasn't full enough, but I did have such a discussion with him, yes. And he agreed when I discussed it with him that dash would be all right for Pond 3. But he also said that maybe a little more time in Weewa would be also useful, doing a sweep early and a sweep late. We're very concerned that the milfoil in Weewa has been greatly reduced by the lowering of the lake. And we're very concerned that we keep it in check and don't let it spread and become, again, very, very much more costly for the village to maintain. What happened? Meg Vaught. I've got Meg Vaught here. Can you all?
Hi, Meg.
Okay, I'm all right. Was that clear, Maureen?
Yeah, no, it's clear. I just, it's still just overall, I'm confused about, which we can talk about later in a different time, about, what the Lakes Committee's the difference of opinion potentially between the Lakes Committee and the Lakes manager on the long-term effectiveness. And, we hired a Lakes manager to be the expert. So I want to make sure that expert is giving us the best advice. So any opinions that the Lakes Management Committee has should be given, as you said, they're starting to be given to the Lakes manager, and let them take that into their consideration and then come up with a final recommendation. To me, that's what I'd love to see, because, we did hire an expert, and I'd like to go with the expert's opinion.
I understand. Okay. Well, we can have another discussion, but the time is very short. What kind of time do you give me to have a further discussion with the lake manager?
Paul or Alan?
Well, I think, we're going to be getting the water quality report, which is going to result in a further discussion. Paul and I have included Jim in all these discussions with regard to AJ and everything. So we had a discussion with regard to his recommendations, with regard to, plant life. We're going to have the same when we have a conference call with regard to water quality. So I think at that time would probably be the prudent time to bring up additional concerns Jim or the Lakes Committee has, and we can flush them out then.
Can we do that soon?
Well, it's predicated on the fact on when AJ produces the water quality report.
Would it be? I mean, I don't know. You need to make plans with the dash harvesters so that we don't lose out to them, for at least for Weewa. And so I guess the sooner that gets done, the better.
Correct. We were promised that the water quality report would be produced to us by the end of last month. It hasn't. We've got assurances we'll get it today. So.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, Jim. Okay. Mr. Barnett, do you have any comments?
Not on this, no. I think the summary of Alan and Paul is excellent. I think.
Okay. What is your position?
I think Jim has raised some legitimate concerns. I think it's all of our concerns.
All right. So last time we voted, you voted against chemical. Is that your position at this time, or have you changed your mind? Pardon me?
I am still listening. Are we up for a vote right now?
No, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were. You hadn't spoken yet.
No, I think that next question is going to go on the Big Lake and the cost. I think that we have a big issue as to the cost of pulling, which is significant, versus the cost of the chemical, which is much more affordable. I think it may come down to a question of cost.
Okay. I have sort of sketched out a plan. And in year one, well, basically what we'll be looking at is chemicals in some part and the Dash in others. And this year it would be Dash as an outside vendor, but I would hope that after this year, we would have our own equipment and our own Dash team, and that would reduce costs. But the year one, what I would do is I would use Prosilacor in the main lake, and I would do that first.
David, I don't mean to be rude, but can you just confirm, are you jumping the conversation now to Tuxedo Lake, or are we done with Pond 3 and Weewa, or is this all?
They're actually included, but
okay.
So let me go through this and we could always circle back. So the reasons for hitting the Tuxedo Lake now is because it's the biggest problem, and I just don't think Dash has ever been able to get ahead of it. So I'd go with chemical in the Big Lake. Then I think then Pond 3, we have a choice of hitting it with Prosilacor. We did do one test 2 years ago, or doing Dash harvesting. So I see Tuxedo Lake as chemical. I see Pond 3 as a choice of Dash or chemical. And I see the Weewa as never having chemical because of the swimming, etc. And so this year in the Weewa, I would suggest Dash. Again, so you have Dash as an outside vendor this year, but then hopefully in the future, we would have our own equipment. So that would be, and then going into year two, I do the exact same thing again, and year three, the same thing again, and really try and get ahead of the problem. And so that's what I was thinking in terms of a potential plan.
So it sounds like an interesting plan. I think personally, I would like to line it up with I'd like to line it up with what the manager says about their recommendation, what the Lakes Committee's view is, but mainly what the Lakes manager, hopefully the Lakes manager and Lakes Committee can come to an agreement, and then we can just cost it out and look at the differences and cost it out with your plan. Or you could talk to the manager and see what.
No, I mean, I think that the plan takes into consideration a lot of what is said in the lake manager's report. But there's flexibility. I'm just suggesting a let's move ahead policy. You know, the debating's been going on for quite a long time, and you know, we need a plan. And I would suggest that this is a potential 3-year plan that we can debate.
David, can I interrupt?
Yes, please.
Maybe it would be fruitful for us. I think we framed pond number 3 in the Weewa. Now let Paul frame what we know from the Lakes manager and our discussions with regard to Tuxedo Lake. And then
Terrific.
From there, that kind of overlaps into your proposal.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Paul.
Sure, go ahead. So, as I mentioned, previously, Tuxedo Lake, our lakes manager does recommend Prosilacor. We've asked the lakes manager whether what the harm would be, in his opinion, for doing it this year or versus next year. His view is that there's not much of a loss in waiting a year. So that's the opportunity cost of sort of waiting a year. He says it's pretty much as bad as it's going to get. The costs of dash versus herbicide are pretty dramatic. And in point of fact, both dash harvesters we've spoken to, one formally and one rather informally, both indicated that they do not believe that dash is the appropriate way to initially attack Tuxedo Lake, as well. It may very well be suitable, for follow-on mitigation, in their opinion, but they both indicated that a herbicide treatment would be the best and most effective way to initially treat Tuxedo Lake. There's a great deal of one of the threads that goes through NER's report is the importance of getting community buy-in, community support for what you're doing, particularly with respect to treating a reservoir with a herbicide.
Yeah.
It would have been great if we had rolled this back 6 months earlier and could have the results we had today, so that we could do that and be in a position of having had a broader community discussion and a broader community education on the benefits and burdens of herbicide versus dash. But that's, unfortunately not the way the timetable rolled out. It took a year of testing. It took several months of analysis, and it took a little bit of time to get vendor quotes together. So that's sort of where we are today.
So just to be clear, are you saying that even though the chemical treatment would be more efficient and less expensive, you don't think that we could do it this year because we haven't had community buy-in?
Well, saying whether we could or couldn't do it, there's always a question of whether you can do it in terms of the regulatory requirements, and the longer we are into the spring and summer, the harder it is to get through the permitting process. And we have not done that in terms of permitting process on Tuxedo Lake. We've done it, previously in terms of obtaining the permit for pond number 3, although we didn't wind up using that last year. So we kind of know that we can get that done in pond 3, assuming, as Brian pointed out yesterday, assuming you can find, state workers working and able to process these things, at this time. Whether you're able to get that through the permitting process for the reservoir and time for a midsummer application is a question, but that's a question we can answer. Whether the other part of that is whether it's something that's imperative enough to do now without a wider vetting of what the community wants to do or thinks is prudent to do with regard to its drinking water supply, and getting the community educated, and getting ourselves all educated. The chemical that we're talking about is relatively new. It's considered, both by our lakes manager and by the DEC and by the EPA as being, quote, safe for use in reservoirs. There isn't a drinking water restriction on it. But that, getting that data and getting people comfortable with that data, might be a little bit of a process, and it might be better waiting until next spring in order to complete that process.
Yeah, I think that, there's a couple comments. And Brian, I'm going to come to you in a minute in terms of what your recommendations would be on community buy-in. But certainly that process could go 1 or 2 or 3 years. There might be a group of people in the park, a minority, but very vocal, who might not want the chemical in and would fight it including through lawsuits and so forth for years. So, I mean, I'd like to do community buy-in to the extent that Brian would say we can move forward without, say, a majority, with a majority, excuse me. Because I think that, you know, this would really potentially, I mean, you can think of 1,000 examples around here. And if we go out to the public in a big way, that would, I think that would include the town. And that would be an entirely new group we would have to satisfy. So, I mean, we didn't do that with Pond 3. We just put it in. We warned the people around the pond and we put it in. We did not do that with any buy-in from the community. And I mean, the results speak for themselves. I mean, I don't know. I didn't get a single complaint. I don't know if you guys did or not, but I'd want to avoid that step as much as possible. Otherwise, this thing will be in another 15-year quagmire. Brian, do you have any comments on what our obligations would be in terms of putting chemicals in the water in regards to the people that live here and their concern about the reservoir?
I don't know if there's a legal notification requirement other than there's probably some posting requirements, as you did in the lake that you mentioned. You know, it's really a policy board question and whether, you know, you want to sort of do public outreach and have the discussion publicly, or whether so long as you're doing something lawful that you can do and you approve it by a majority and decide not to put it out there to everybody, you know, and just take whatever steps you have to take, you know, that's really sort of a political question. If you think there's going to be backlash or something that's going to happen, you know, if you don't put it out there that you're doing a treatment, you know, I'm not sure there's any legal issue with it as long as you comply with any requirements there may be for posting, you know, around the water or the lake if there is such a requirement.
Right, thank you. So yeah, that's what I would encourage is doing the chemical treatment and doing it legally and making our presentation, but not turn it into a public hearing or anything of the such, town hall meeting, none of those kinds of things. I just think that's a quagmire. And as long as we're not doing anything illegal, maybe it is a political question, but you know, we can let others decide that at the polls. But I think that, well, I do know, you may recall I did a survey with all the lakefront properties, and their argument is very strong, as is the people on Pond 3. They formed a neighborhood committee and wanted to have, and may have a member on the committee. And all of the people on the lake, except for the shores, said, yes, we're begging you, please do this right away. They feel like they're paying you know, high property taxes because they're on the lake, and yet they can't recreate in the lake. That's their view. And that's very strong in Pond 3 because you can actually swim in the lake. So that's pretty much what I think we should consider.
Now, Mayor, I should point out that, you know, there's still the open question about the environmental review. We're not with Procelicor anyway. So if in fact it ended up that there was a site specific, you know, environmental impact statement required, besides the expense of it, that would become a public process. But
right, I'm aware of that. Yep, I'm aware of the secret process, and I take your advice. I mean, we're gonna go to the DEC and see what happens.
Right. I have a feeling it may not be required. It seems that they have the ability to look at the application and say it's covered by the existing generic GEISs. But, you know, it's just that's the only part that would then become public if it was required.
Alan, are we still involved with lakes management?
With regard to CSLAP, David?
Yeah, you know, our original lake, Solitude, excuse me. Are we still involved with Solitude?
Yes, we are. And the quote we got with regard to using the herbicide and was through them.
Okay, and I know that, you know,
and they do the permitting process too.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that, because I know that they've been working on this Croton on the Hudson project, and they are using chemical for hydrilla. And So if we were still involved with them, we could, ask them if they thought we might be facing a headwind if we apply, and or let them apply for us.
Let me put it this way. I think they know we were facing a headwind because they used to be our lakes manager, and then they no longer were when we hired Near. So now we use them for when we do copper sulfate treatments. We do some testing, they come and do that. And in addition to that, if we do use chemical treatment, they've been the most cost-effective vendor to use.
Mm-hmm. Jim, to you, with Solitude, I think the feeling very much so with your group was that they were chemical pushers. And that's why we went to another group. So I do think that, as Maureen said, we need to do some sort of system that's going to fall within their guidelines. And as I said earlier, I think it's a combination of chemical and DASH, depending on which body of water. Are you comfortable with this group, Jim?
Yeah, am I comfortable with what group?
The one that just gave us the recommendation.
Near.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes, we have no argument with Near.
All right. So there's no feelings that they're just trying to push the chemical or anything like
No,
that?
no, I don't think so. No,
Okay, great. Okay. Who would like to speak next?
Can I ask a question? Paul said that the Big Lake is not going to get any worse. It's as bad as it can be. Is there any sense in just doing Pond 3 and Weewa with the recommendation of Near, which would involve chemicals in Pond 3, and to see how to give us one more year of data, and then approach the Big Lake next year? I think that there are very legitimate concerns that the public has that need to be addressed in some form. You need at least to be heard. In view of everything going on right now with the virus and so forth, is this the time to do that, or is doing Pond 3 and the Big Weewa an acceptable compromise?
Well, I would say, by the way, did you say that Near said that the Weewa will not grow anymore in Tuxedo Lake?
I think I quoted, I think that was what Paul said, is that it's as bad as it can get. Is that right?
I think the mayor asked a different question. It wasn't a comparison of Weewa and Tuxedo. I asked Near whether if we waited till next year, whether Tuxedo Lake would get materially worse, and the answer was no. You'd have a great concern if we didn't have a program to deal with it. In other words, if we went forward without a program saying we're going to get our arms and get the community behind us doing it this year, but next year our program is, unless something comes up, that tells us otherwise, to do a Procelicor treatment in Tuxedo Lake.
All right. So basically, I would say that if we're going to have a plan for a permit for doing the Procelicor, other than the fact that it's a reservoir, we'd probably have a better opportunity, you think, on Pond 3 and Weewa? And then my second question would be, at this point, one of the criticisms before, but we were doing a test, was that why are we putting chemical treatment in the Pond 3 and Weewa and doing nothing in the main lake? Because then, of course, the bits and pieces break off of the milfoil plant and then repopulate the Pond 3 and the Weewa. On the other hand, the DASH might be the way to go in both the Pond 3 and the Weewa, and just one chemical treatment on Tuxedo Lake. So that's really what I've got on the table, and I'll just leave it to you guys to discuss it.
Right. Well, you haven't compared the costs. I think as I understand, the cost of the DASH is what, $1.5 million? Am I right about that? And
Yeah, so there are two quotes for dash harvesting on Tuxedo Lake. I'd say the more what NEAR views, and I think what I would view as the more reliable one of those two is $400,000 odd a year for 3 years, and that's sort of consistent with the notion that it takes. We have about close to 40 acres of littoral zone milfoil growing there, and you can do about a quarter to a half acre a day. So that's sort of where those, that leads to those numbers. There is, in my mind, sort of a significant difference between a Procelicor treatment in pond number 3, which is not, a drinking water reservoir, and Tuxedo Lake, and that's the major hesitation I personally have. I understand it's EPA approved. I understand it's it's DEC permitted. There's no drinking water restriction on it, but it is still a relatively new chemical. So that's one of the reasons why you can't get a long-term study on it. It was only first registered with the EPA in 2018, I think. So there's only been a couple of years of use around. So waiting another year does give us the advantage of another year of data and another year of other communities, potential use of that. Procelicor in pond number 3, I'd say if we were comfortable using, 2,4-D, which is what we used a couple of years ago, in pond number 3, I would certainly, everything that we see tells us that Procelicor is better, it's a better and probably safer herbicide than 2,4-D.
So you're saying use that in pond 3?
I would, yes. That's where I would.
Maureen?
Sorry, I took it off mic. I also want the Lakes Committee and the Lakes Manager to agree. I'd like to hear that agreement.
Anyone else?
I agree with you, Maureen, and I feel a little uncomfortable at this point because, we recommended this lake manager, and we do think that he's good. I have no reason to not. And we had kind of wanted to have a meeting, have the committee have a meeting with him, and I think in future years we really should do that, because I think I would like the committee and the lake manager to be in agreement on recommendations. And I think whether we're in agreement in a unanimous way or not, that isn't important, but that we know exactly where we stand relative to the lake manager. There may be some disagreements within the committee, but that we have that hashed out. And I think the only way to have that hashed out is to have our committee have a meeting with the lake manager. Now, I understand that having a meeting with the lake manager is expensive, but I think it's worth doing if we're going to have a lake committee, and you're going to be interested in what the lake committee has to say, that we in fact have the lake committee have a meeting with the lake manager. I think it's maybe late for that at this point, and with all the distancing involved and so forth. I suppose Zoom is possible. But anyway, that's my point.
So can I just say something to Jim? Jim, and I'm sure this would be the case, but I would ask the Lakes Committee, and I would expect that the Lakes Committee is going to be very open-minded about using chemicals if they feel that that's the best route and recommended by the Lakes Manager. So to me, the discussion is really raising your concerns, getting responses, and from an expert professional perspective, coming to a conclusion, which people may not like on the Lake Committee or the Lakes Manager, either way. But
right.
That's what I would hope and expect, and I'm sure that's the path you're planning on taking as well.
Right. I just like to clear the air with regard to one thing is, it's Paul and I have not monopolized the lake manager's time. We have given unfettered access of the Lakes Committee to ask questions to the Lakes Manager. So This is not something that's been sprung upon anybody. The data, when it comes out, is given to the Lakes Committee. The Lakes Committee meets whenever it does. So this isn't all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I just received the data and I disagree with it. This has been a work in progress, and to be honest, the Lakes manager has been forthright on what he believes is the correct approach, I would say, for the last 6 to 9 months. So I don't really see this as a revelation in that regard.
All right, but we have not actually sat down with the lake manager, which I think is an important step, that's all.
Right, but you have had the ability to ask questions of the lake manager, correct?
Of course.
Yes, that
We have not had a meeting with him, that's what I'm saying.
You've had a meeting with him, with Paul and myself. The rest of the Lakes Committee has not, but you're the lead of the Lakes Committee.
That's right, that was a conference.
Okay.
So I guess the outcome, if the Lakes manager, if everybody agrees, Lakes Committee rather, should post haste, have a Zoom meeting or however you want to handle it with the Lakes manager to flush out these issues, no pun intended, but flush out these issues as soon as possible, right? And come to a conclusion. And Alan, I wasn't suggesting at all that what you guys were monopolizing. I hope you didn't think I was their time.
No, I'm worried about a little slippery path here. Is the Lakes Committee is a community-oriented group, not, and they have a say in the matter like every other resident does, but they aren't the be all and end all in regard to that. I mean, we originally the life we're all living in now, the idea was to have the Lakes manager come in and do a presentation to the community, like we had with, what was his name? Glenn Sullivan from Solitude. But obviously that is not the case. We could theoretically have him make a presentation via Zoom and do a slideshow and let people go in that way. That way we get broader community understanding of the issues and everything. And I think, we could go that. I'm not sure why we're saying a group of 6 or 7 people should have the access if we can broaden that and expand it via Zoom.
I wouldn't be
Well,
opposed.
if you're going to listen to the Lakes Committee, then the Lakes Committee, I think, should do as I say and have a meeting with the lake manager and be in agreement. If you don't think the Lakes Committee is worth listening to, then we don't need to do it.
I mean, I think that with you could have a meeting with the Lakes Committee and the manager. You could tape it and put it on the website. That's being done frequently right now. It's a very useful thing. People can listen to it at their own leisure. I think the one other element you haven't mentioned, Paul, yet is the comparative cost of the treating the big lake with Pacelicore, which I understand is significantly less. So I think it comes down to a significant difference in cost.
Yeah. Just to again, yes, I think we talked about the cost of dash harvesting, as being $400,000 or so over 3 years. The cost for Pacelicore, what Solitude in conjunction with the supplier of Pacelicore, a company called CPRO, does is they have a 3-year program, and although the data indicates that Pacelicore is pretty good at beating back Eurasian water milfoil in year 1, but they guarantee it for 3 years, so that if there is any regrowth over those, in year 2 or 3, they will come back and treat that. Now we have to flush that out a little bit and kind of define what does success really mean. Does it mean 80% or 90% or 95%? But the thrust of it is they have a 3-year program, and they will spread the cost of about $116,000 3-year program over 3 years, a little bit front loaded. So that financially is much far superior to the cost of dash harvesting. And I will caveat that by saying that no matter how much expensive it is, obviously safety is the most significant factor there. So that leads me again to going back and kind of saying this kind of, in my mind, militates in favor of going down this path, preparing for this path, and really taking a good hard look and a full discussion with the community about Prosilacor.
And then go back to the question of what's the downside of waiting, of doing the treatment they recommend, which includes Prosilacor, on Weewa and Pond 3, and waiting to treat the big lake because it's not going to get any worse.
Well, nobody's recommending Prosilacor for the Weewa. I mean, you know, we all have the right approach here. I think is we all want to avoid a herbicide if we can avoid a herbicide, and the milfoil concentrations and propagation in Weewa is, in the opinion of NER, manageable through dash harvesting. There isn't a lot of it there, but this is the time. This is the time to go at it and attack it when it's small. You know.
Okay. I understood that on the Pond 3 that it would be a combination of chemical and dash harvesting. Is that wrong?
That is correct, because at the southern end of Pond 3, there's a more water flow, and herbicides don't work as well where there's a faster water flow. So the recommendation is, they would treat the entire lake, but Pond 3, you'd have to go in and hand harvest at the southern end.
Paul and Alan, I just want to address that point that because the milfoil may or may not grow more, because Tuxedo Lake is apparently, I guess what you're saying, it's maxed out. I'm not really sure, but the condition of it now and last year and the year before is untenable. So it doesn't need to be any more miserable if it doesn't grow. So I just don't think, I think that's worth saying.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Absolutely. That is a cost. The cost of living this way for another year is a significant cost.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll say, David, and you were correct with regard to, we had a barrier curtain at the southern end of Tuxedo Lake, which, for all purposes, didn't really solve much, didn't really do anything, and we removed that. The concern now is that whatever from Tuxedo Lake falls into pond number 3 and then falls into the Weewa, and that's where we're putting the barrier curtain. So we try to minimize the fragments moving from one body of water to the other. So that certainly was a valid point and is something that we, irrespective of what we agreed to do on the other issues, we will be doing this year.
Okay, so anyone else have any comments? So Alan, McHugh, and Paul, what is your deliverable? Do you need a deliverable today? Are you looking for a vote on something?
Well, I mean, I'll give you my 2 cents, then Paul can opine on his. I don't think there's a deliverable. I think this was a fruitful discussion because we wanted to air these issues, get trustee feedback. Hopefully residents who choose to listen in or listen to tape recording will get a sense of what the dynamics are and what the issues are. I mean, we've provisionally put it in the budget, 150K, of which 50K comes from the general and 100 from the water. The 100 from the water would be exclusively for Tuxedo Lake. The 50 from the general fund goes to pond number 3 and the Weewa. Obviously, we do have a budget shortfall, or we're forecasting a shortfall for the upcoming fiscal year. So we need to figure out where we can pay our costs and everything. So we just wanted to better frame this issue because, rightly or wrongly, our budget for the lakes management has gone basically from 10,000 up to 150,000. And I think a lot of people could say we've squandered the money because it doesn't feel, you look at what's happened on Tuxedo Lake and things are a hell of a lot worse. I accept that, certainly accept that argument. We've put a policy and a discipline in place, and to Jim's credit and the Lakes Committee's credit, we're coming up with a long-term plan to manage the lakes. So that money has been deployed, but we haven't seen good results as of yet. So that's my 2 cents. Paul?
Yeah, I think that's all fair. To the point of deliverables, I think the most critical thing time-wise is a sort of a direction on pond number 3, because while I checked in with our dash harvesters a week or so ago, and they were still kind of holding time for us, that I don't know how much longer, well, absent our current state of COVID-19 emergency, I wouldn't know how much longer, they could do that. And I don't know what that does to their schedules and their availability. But absent that, it's spring, and last year it was very tough getting commitments for their time, at this point in the year. So we should pick a direction on that, I think, in fairly short order. It'd be great if we could do that in a week, Jim, if whatever, dialogue you want to have with AJ can get done within that time frame.
Yes, that's time enough. Yes, that's time enough.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Mayor, you're still muted.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
Is there anyone else that has anything to say about lakes management, or would you like to move on? Okay, I didn't hear anything, so I'll move on. Who wants to take the boating activity helm? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I didn't
Oh,
put it.
who put that on the agenda?
That wasn't me, but I can take it if you'd like.
Whoever put it on the agenda, let's give the floor.
Debbie, who put it on the agenda?
One of us on the call.
Just to be
Why do we
clear,
need Debbie?
Debbie doesn't have a microphone on her computer, so she texted me. I don't know who put it on the agenda, so I can't be of any value. I'll text her now and see what I can find out.
Okay, so should we move on until we hear?
Well, I can take the issue. I can, as far as I know, and then everybody can chime in. And Mac, I thought I sent everybody a response last night after the ask.
Yeah, no, I read that. Remember I responded this morning?
No, everybody else I'm talking to.
Oh, let me just, I have an espresso. I'll be right back.
So you guys saw the email that I responded to Mac's question.
Yes.
Yep. So,
Hey, Maureen, it's not particularly helpful for anybody who's coming onto the call. Can you just frame it somewhat?
No,
because
yeah, I was just waiting
referencing that only 4 people have read doesn't do anything.
Yeah, no. I wanted to make sure the trustees saw it. Yes, I was going to frame the issue. So I had received a number of, just to frame the issue, I had received a number of calls and inquiries from people about whether or not the people could use boats at the club. And these calls came through after the club sent out an email saying that the boating was closed. And I can't remember the exact language, but it was something to effect like, after speaking to village officials, they were advised to close the boathouse, basically, or not use recreational boating.
What?
So,
wait, I'm sorry, what was that?
Well, that's what I said in the, that's what the club's letter says, and that's what I said in my email to you last night.
No, I just didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. yes, that I had gotten, after the club sent out the letter on, I don't remember what day, I think it was the 31st. What happened was that I got a number of inquiries about, is it true and why can't we use boats on the lake or the tuxedo boats that are available? And I said, geez, it doesn't really make sense to me, although, this is a strange time. It doesn't really make sense to me that that the executive order would cover boats as long as you complied with the no gatherings of any size restriction. So the email that came out from the club said that they had spoken to village officials or advised by village officials that they could not basically open the boathouse and allow members to use boats from the club. So I wanted to find out, like, 'cause again, there's not as much detail on some of these executive orders. So I wanted to know who they spoke with. So I sent an email to the club saying, hey, by the way, who advised you from the village that you can't use the lake or the boats? Because I said, my understanding is that's not the case. And then they sent me emails that you had sent, Mac, on, I guess, Saturday, basically saying, and now I see the misunderstanding. So the emails that you had sent basically included an email from the club that said they're going to be opening the docks April 1st. So the club, it seems, interpreted your email, which basically said the executive order says no gatherings of any size. And then your order also said, your email also suggested that voting was not allowed, voting was included in the executive order. So the way the club interpreted was that gatherings of any size meant like even one person, I guess, going out on the lake. So that, and because you had said voting was included, they took that as to mean that no one can use the boats. So when I got clarification of their thought process and explained where the most recent interpretation is, they sent out a correcting email to all members that they could use the boats. So that's the history of it. And I'm glad people asked me about it, and I'm glad I inquired, because reading through all the emails, I see where the confusion was on the club's side and how they interpreted, they reasonably interpreted the emails to that conclusion. So that's the long.
All right. By the way, I was always available if you wanted to call me and find out what the confusion was, because it's very clear. Unfortunately, the club misinterpreted it. I can't speak for them. And did that with their members. So, look, they made a mistake, and he called me or emailed me, and I responded, and he was clear. And then he sent out a new one basically saying exactly what I told him. Then that was, I think, yesterday. So yeah, I mean, that happens. Sometimes people don't understand. That's to be expected. And, you have to deal with that.
So Mac, just by the way, I definitely would have called you if I knew you were the village official they had spoken to. That's why I asked them.
Yeah, I don't know why he said that. I don't know. I mean, I would have thought he would say I talked to the mayor, but I don't know what he's talking about with that. I think he was just putting a generic sentence in there.
I don't think he spoke to you at that point. He just sent me the emails. And by the way, in the club's defense, I can understand how they drew that conclusion, from the emails that went back and forth. And that's sometimes a problem with emails.
Well, so, the people that have boats at the club didn't misunderstand it, and were surprised when that came out from the club. I got those calls too. So, really, this all started with the club's incorrect interpretation of what I sent out. I was working at the same time with Greg Libby, who's in charge of the Village Boat Club. He didn't misunderstand it. So really, I mean, I'm not pointing fingers at the manager of the club, but it was a mistake what he put out.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yeah, please.
So not about the communication so much, but is the club still renting out or making available its public boats to people? And are they supporting this with the use of on-site employees?
No, the employees, the is not, the boat club, the boathouse is not going to be open. And they're going to allow, I mean, as I mentioned to the club yesterday, kayaks, canoes, rowboats, sailboats, those are all fine. And, but it is clear that the party boats, while they could be rented, can't be used as a quote unquote party boat. You have to do exactly what Maureen said, which is the social distancing and groups of less than so-and-so. So, I mean, I'll give you just a funny analogy. There's nothing in the order from Cuomo that says we can't have 50 boats on the lake at the same time, as long as we're 6 feet apart and have, let's just say, a couple that's been, quarantined together. So, I mean, that's the point. You just need to control the number of people. For example, if you have a boathouse, I don't see having a dinner party on your dock. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And just the same, it's a metaphor for going out boating. You can't have a dinner party on your boat.
Right.
And what I'm trying to encourage the club and others to do is to please follow those guidelines tightly, because if we don't, they're going to make them even stricter.
So can I make, oh,
So
sorry.
the point, the issue I was raising is because there are, I think the Village Boat Club has handled this a little differently. They have essentially shut down their use of communal boats because they feel they can't guarantee, the sanitation and the safety from one user to another.
Correct. So if the club wants to, if the Tuxedo Club wants to adopt that, that's certainly fine with me, and I think would be fine with anybody. That's
Dave,
trying to, yeah.
can I just jump in?
Sure.
The missive from the club manager last night was as follows: kayaks, sculls, sailboats, rowboats, and canoes that are stored at the boathouse are allowed. Privately owned boats renting dock space are allowed in the lake, but so basically it's only privately owned boats. It's not shared boats. I think that's what Paul's getting at, or what both of you are getting at, and which is a responsible thing. Yep, Maureen.
In my original email to him, which I can send you after the meeting, I did discuss the party boats, the rental boats, but again, it's up to the club. If they feel that they can't control, can't meet the guidelines, the health guidelines that are out now, they shouldn't rent. If they're comfortable that they can control that and make sure it's only one family or whatever the choice might be, then they're welcome to do that. It's really not for me to tell them.
Can I interrupt for just 2 seconds? Okay, so I am clarifying that it's not just privately owned boats at the club. In other words, if they have boats that they rent out, like kayaks, I'm not sure. I'm checking to see if that is included in what's closed down, or if it's just the boats, the kayaks that you own. That I'm checking.
There might. I was wondering the same. I don't know if they're going to just leave the boathouse open and available with a sign-up sheet, but or however. But yeah, all those things are included, and skulls obviously. And
Okay, so
people should be allowed to access them. If I were a club member and I couldn't get my skull out, I wouldn't be happy about it.
So just to be clear, the way I interpret, and Brian, you're there, the way I interpret, and I've advised people this, the way I interpret the social gatherings, executive order, whatever it is, 202.10, is that even if you practice, which is different what you were saying, even if you practice the social distancing of 6 feet, right? Social gatherings of any size, which means more than one person, are prohibited. So even if you were 6 feet apart in a social gathering, that is prohibited. And I understand why that would be the case.
No, I don't agree with that. But you can use if you feel that is important, and you feel that you shouldn't, then you need to talk to the club. You're a governor, right?
This is more
Talk to the club and let them make the decision. They're welcome to make the decision. This isn't for me to. I'm just sending them the information I got from the executive orders, and I can beg, I can plead, but if they rent out boats, it's to their own detriment, because the police and the building inspectors now have the right to enforce all of the social distancing and meeting gatherings, and they could get a penalty. It's up to them. I mean, if if they allow people on the rented boats or anything else, they're going to have to live with their rule.
I'm not talking about the club. I'm talking about in general. Brian, you were going to give clarification?
Well, I actually showed this to Brian, and he read it and said, everything you're saying here is fine.
Which thing are we talking about?
The one that, remember I sent you a draft and you didn't get a chance to look at it until the next day. And you said, oh, okay, that was, everything you said was fine. That was the one we're talking about with the information on the boats.
Yeah, but that was kind of general, wasn't it? To just say that there are restrictions in place and that they had to comply with them. I don't remember it being very specific beyond that.
I have it.
And it's pretty easy. Can we just ask a specific question, Brian? Which is my read of 202.10. And by the way, I attend a call, as does Paul, Allen, and Allen every day with the county executive. And it is becoming a critical issue that we must stay at home and pay attention to 202.10. And that order says no social gatherings of any size. So even if you practice, forgetting about the club, even if you practice social distancing, the no social gatherings of any size takes precedent over the 6 foot distancing.
Well, you know what I mean. I think that let's be realistic about this order. If you have a family that's been quarantined together, that has 4 people, they should be allowed to go out in their boat. And that's a social gathering more than one. And I'm sure that the health department would agree with that interpretation, or at least be willing to discuss it. I mean,
Okay,
I don't read that as you can't have more than one person, or if 2 people's a social gathering. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me.
No, excluding people in the same household, which I think has been an exception that has been made.
Yes,
so
I
Brian,
agree with that. Yeah, I agree. Right. That's
so
what
you're all basically discussing the specifics of an executive order, which of course is not very specific. They aren't. The executive orders are terrible. That one, excuse me, in its actual language says non-essential gatherings of individuals of any size for any reason, and then in parentheses, for example, parties, celebration, or other social events are canceled or postponed at this time. So that of course leaves a million questions open, which are the ones you're talking about. Yeah, does it apply to a family that's together in a car and they're living together anyway, or they're sitting in a park that happens to be open, you know, or if they go out in a boat, arguably you'd say, well, you're in a house together, so what's the difference, you know? And this is a matter of enforcement. Are we really going to go out there and say, hey, we've had the same issue with golf courses and other places. They're using single carts, but then people are, you know, getting within their 6 foot distance on the golf course. If a person's out there playing by themselves or with somebody else and they're not next to each other, then is there some violation that's enforceable? The problem, you know, really comes down to how do you enforce one sentence that lacks all of the detail that you would need to determine what's permissible and what's not. I agree with most of what was just said. I don't think a couple of people going out on a boat that are already living together is an issue versus, you know, having a party at the club. Or people gathering, even if, and I do agree with Trustee Cohen, I don't think you can have an event and just say everybody stay 6 feet apart, because the social gatherings are basically canceled or postponed. But I read that as more in line with events and parties, not families doing things together.
Right. So
yeah, and I also mentioned that they need to be cautious on the dock as well in terms of assembly. So look, it's up to the club. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they can take it, they can interpret it, they can do what they want with it. I can't do much more than just advise them in terms of what the executive order said generally.
Okay, and I'm not talking about the club. I just want everybody to understand everything that I've heard, and Mac, you actually say this all the time, common sense should prevail, right? So the way I interpret 202.1, we are getting into a very critical stage in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think it's important for village residents to understand that social gatherings of any size, regardless of whether you stay 6 feet apart, is prohibited and should be avoided. Enforcement aside, this is mentality. This is how we need to be responsible residents. We should not be gathering in groups at all, even if we're 6 feet apart. Now, if you happen to be on the lake, walking around Weewa, and you're, 6 feet apart, you must stay 6 feet apart from somebody else. If you happen to chat with them, great. But we have to use common sense. And but the fundamental premise, in my view, is that we can have social gatherings of no size, family excluded. People, forgetting family, people that live in the same house excluded. Family that doesn't live in the same house actually is something that I think creates risk. And
of course. Now, just to mention, there's at least 3 COVID-19 updates that I've sent out that address social distancing. So, I mean, it's on everyone's mind, and I've seen it practiced all over the park. I'm very pleased. People outside exercising, that type of thing. Everyone's being very cautious. I was very impressed. Working at the boathouse, looking at the street, people walking and exercising, following the rules on the causeway, drive by, following the rules. I think that the village is very aware of this, and I think that if the village would like to do something stricter, like your interpretation, one, it's your interpretation, and 2, would there be pushback from people who would expect to be able to use their boats, and you're saying that they can't necessarily?
No, I'm not saying you're
okay, no, you're right. Excuse me. I think everyone knows that they should be the ones on the boat, and no one else should be on the boat with them. I think that's very clear.
Okay, Mac, you're looking at it very narrow. Okay, this is the end of the conversation. I am not suggesting, from my perspective, I am not suggesting enforcement. I'm not suggesting the village say anything, put a policy in place that's different than what the state is saying. I am saying my communication to people, and I'm hoping everybody on this call, their communication to people is no social gatherings of any size. My exception is excluding people that live in the same house. No social gatherings of any size. This is a common sense approach, regardless if you're 6 feet apart, should occur, because there is always risk. You float in from 6 feet and out, and nobody's talking about enforcement. We're talking about common sense and approach and the mentality that we should be promoting. I have received requests to meet in the park and have like book club, etc., with people sitting 6 feet apart. And I had to remind people that, it really social gatherings of no size is what is the predominant. Mm-hmm.
So let me just say, and the other flip side of that is I believe there are restrictions on non-essential businesses operating, particularly with, the support of persons. So again, I'm not suggesting enforcement one way or another, but while we're on the same subject, people should be mindful that I don't know whether there is a boatmaster there. Businesses that are conducting business in the park should only be doing that within the guidelines of being an essential business. That's largely a determination they make themselves, although I've heard on Steve Newhouse's calls lately that they are looking to have more of a local enforcement of that in particular areas. So that's
all right. So no, thank you. That's a good point. It's changed. There's been 2 executive orders recently that have changed the lookout. First, we had essential and non-essential, and Brian advised us that that's really not for the village to decide, but the vendors to decide themselves, and we shouldn't pass judgment on that. And if someone in the village complained to the Department of Health, that's their right, and then that could be looked at. Now, the most recent one says that, for example, if it's not safety related, construction projects have to stop, although you could have 1 or 2, maybe 1 or 2 people on site max at a time. And the other thing is that we now have enforcement. So if we see, for example, a landscaping crew come in and they're going to spray for ticks, which is a safety matter, and not having long grass is another part of safety matter with ticks. Now, I actually spoke to the chief. We've had ongoing discussions. If it's a group of 1 or 2 people coming in and you clear them to do, and they're clear to do the task, there's no issue there. But if you see a truck of 2, 3, 4, 5 people, you have the right to stop them from coming in. Or if you're the building inspector or the chief and you're driving around the village and you see somebody abusing that privilege, then you have the right to enforce it. The concept about the landscapers right now that we're using is that people are outside exercising, and these landscapers are going to be outside, and the client and the landscapers have to be responsible for self-distancing. And so I think we're at a pretty good place right now with all that, until it changes again. But this is, I received questions about this. I'm responding. I'm probably putting something together on that now. But I spoke about this with Brian at length, and that's where we stand now. I think we're in good shape.
Okay, as long as people don't gather.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think we're doing pretty good. I mean, it's not like we're doing weddings, or baptisms. I mean, this place is pretty locked down. And I'm very proud of what everyone's been doing in terms of following these regulations. I think we're definitely affecting the spread of this. And we're also, just so everyone knows, I'm sure Alan McHugh knows this, there is a series of protocol that the governor sent out that regulates municipal employees and how they should be managed in terms of COVID-19 breakouts. And I've sent all of those, every time they come in, I send them to Jeff, John, and the chief. And they're fully aware of it. I asked them to post it on their walls. There's a recent one that just came out. And both the DPW and the police department, they followed protocol, sent some people home for a while to do the 14-day thing before they bring them back. And so it's been working out very well, controlling the situation. The DPW employee that was asked to take a few days off into quarantine, nothing happened, no symptoms, came back to work, all's copacetic there. So,
David, just can we be clear on this? There were 2 instances on part-time police officers, nobody in the DPW.
That's what I said, 2.
Correct. That was out of caution. With regard to the DPW, there was a test done and a doctor's note, and we just, when there were some mild symptoms, we sent him home, but that was for 3 days till he had testing. That was
perfect. No, I think that's great. And that's right, exactly. You're gonna have to assess each situation and do what you think is necessary, as long as it's within the most recent guidelines from the governor's office. There's certain protocol that has to be followed now, Alan. I'll send you the newest stuff. It's very specific what steps you have to take. And so, we need to look at that again, but you're on the right track there.
We listen to every day. We attend a call at 4 o'clock, and they go through all of these items. So Alan and Paul and Alan and I have been really paying attention to that and making sure.
All right, so you don't need me to send that to you?
No, you can. Well, I send it. I can get it online. But I'm saying that that is one of the big topics. The questions are always asked about. What is the protocol? And the health commissioner basically goes through the protocol almost every day. For instance, when can somebody return to work? How long do you put somebody out? There's a whole bunch of very specific protocol that.
All right. So are we good with this conversation?
I believe so.
I hope so.
Okay. All right. Moving on to social media. Who wants to take the floor? I think that would be Maureen.
Sorry, I keep putting myself on mute. Okay, so I sent out a social media policy to all the trustees. That is a basic policy. It came from a discussion. I had a discussion with myself and Paul Glock had a discussion with the chief about the policy that we were proposing. The policy was formulated from the template, thank you, Brian, that was sent to us by your firm, plus a review of what Dave, the chief, had done in Monroe. And we walked through all of the elements and also information that came from the mayor from, I think it was the town of New Windsor's, Fishkill's policy. So we took the best of everything, as at least we thought we did, and we formulated the policy that I have sent out to all the trustees. The policy basically states what has to be done in order to get a social media site approved by the trustees. And also at this stage, we are suggesting or stating in our policy that public comments at this stage are not going to be turned on. And the rationale for that is that particularly in this time of, I'm going to call it, crisis effectively, where people have to spend, department heads, chiefs, village officials, village clerks, whatever, have to spend time on very urgent matters, that policing public comments and making sure that they comply with the law and don't create liability from our perspective is something that we shouldn't be spending our time on. So therefore, the easy route at this point is to turn off public comments. We've read a lot of research on the liabilities associated with public comments, obligations associated with public comments. So we've turned that feature, we're suggesting that feature be turned off in the social media policy. Those are the highlights. I mean, there's a bunch of other things. I don't know, Paul, did you want to highlight anything else that I'm forgetting?
No, I think that's a fair characterization. I would say, one of the, whether or not to have, an open forum on Facebook is probably one of the, one of the policy judgments being made here. And I think it goes beyond just sort of a matter of convenience. It really opens, it just opens the door to a whole host of issues and problems that we really don't, and potential liabilities that we really don't need. I think in some of the materials that were circulated by the mayor, for example, there was a case in Hawaii where despite everyone's, I'm sure, best intentions at trying to properly moderate, a Facebook page, posts that were felt were be inappropriate were taken off. It resulted in, litigation. The municipality had a $40,000 or $50,000 judgment against it. It's just not a business that I feel kind of the village should be engaged in. And I'm sure Brian will have some comments here too, but in our conversation with Brian, I think he also is of the view that we're better off without public comments than public comments in a Facebook type environment.
Yeah, just on that point, I think what I did share with you is that on Facebook, you can't just turn off public comments in general. It has to be done by the post. So whoever's doing that has to remember each time they post something to prohibit commenting. Unfortunately, Facebook does not have a do not allow anybody to comment on my page at all option.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good information. We'll share that with the chief.
Just one point on the comment section.
Alan,
There is, I agree with everything Paul's and Maureen have said about the potential liability. And I'd have to look into that a little bit deeper. Just to be clear about the workload that it puts on somebody that's running a site, for example, the chief. Now, he's done it in the past, but what happens is, let's say at the end of the day, you look at the comments and you click which ones to approve. It's a 5-minute process. It's no big deal. And I also see that there's quite a bit of benefit to it in terms of community policing. But anyway, so that's my view on that. Obviously, you guys disagree. But yeah, that's not a deal killer. So why don't you continue? It would be helpful, Maureen, if you were to take all the scenarios that you've put in here, let's say, and if someone wants to post something on the village website, what's the decision tree? What does that look like? Who does it go to? Then what happens? And then when's it posted? And the same for the police Facebook page. If let's say that the chief wants to put up an emergency order for Orange County that he gets through the police, Orange County Police, or whatever, Sheriff's Department, or Homeland Security, that kind of thing. With that, how does that go? Would he have to? Can he just post that, or would he have to go through another decision tree? And so my question is, can you just take me through each scenario with posting and working at the right, and then how did they get there?
Now?
That'd be great.
Okay, so give me the scenario.
All right, so the police officer, the chief wants to post an emergency order that he got from the Sheriff's Department of Orange County. What happens?
The chief can post that. There's no question.
Without going through any other decision tree?
Yep. Paul,
So-
right?
Yeah.
The site administrator has authority as long as the decision tree they have to go through, right, is stated in the policy, which is that the information, there's a list of items that have to be, they have to check, which are like not sensible items, right? It's that the information has to be accurate. There's a whole list of things on section 3 that have to be, the site administrator has to be comfortable with before posting something. And there, again, there's common sense issues.
All right, so let's be specific. If it was something, let's say the chief posts something that you think is not accurate, but let's say it's subjective. What would happen at that point? You said there's a site administrator that would judge that?
The chief is the site administrator for that website.
Okay, so who would review his work to see if it's appropriate to have posted it?
There is no one that's required to review his work. However, the trustees probably have an obligation. The board of trustees probably has an obligation to make sure that it's in compliance. So
Okay,
in that scenario,
yeah.
the board of trustees would have to, first of all, obviously, ask, the way it would work with it not being documented, the way it would work is that somebody would call the chief and say, hey, listen, I'm not sure this is accurate information. Let me explain to you why. And the chief would say, okay, this is where I got it from. And then they come to a meeting of the minds. If there was, accurate information, right, can be sourced and timely, et cetera. So that's something that the chief as site administrator can determine, and then it can be overseen ultimately by the board of trustees, because they have the power to pull down the site or temporarily suspend it. So that's basically the level.
So if it's something that you don't feel is accurate, you're saying a trustee would call the chief and say, we think that's not completely accurate. And then that would be taken to the board of trustees for a review. And then the trustee would go back to the chief and say, you can or cannot post this?
Mac, it's written, what I was just describing about the one trustee.
Well, there's not a lot of people online in this meeting that are reading this right now. So the best way for me to evaluate it is to hear some scenarios.
Right, but I'm saying, what I'm telling you is that you can go back and look at this, right? And anybody can go back and look at it. So the bottom line, what I'm saying to you is that we live in the world of practicalities. If the chief posted inaccurate information, the only lever the board of trustees has, the only official lever pursuant to the policy, is basically to take down the site, remove the site administrator, or temporarily suspend the site. Paul, am I forgetting any other levers that the trustees have as stated in the policy?
I would come at it a different way, I think. And I think what the mayor is asking is, what really happens here? And I'm not so sure that other than the same informal way that if we see a pothole on a road, we might call Jeff and say, hey, Jeff, there's a pothole here on this X road. Just because we're trustees and we do that, we're not exercising any supervision over Jeff when we tell him that, any more than we might have a conversation with the chief and say, hey, XYZ, this post, I have a comment on it, and he would take that comment into consideration the same way Jeff would take his pothole repair into consideration in doing his job. what I think the policy does is just set a set of expectations and appropriate rules for the posting. It doesn't really, I don't think it's really meant to implement sort of an ongoing, comment by comment review process. There are standards, as there should be for postings. They're pretty general and appropriate standards. Probably most appropriately, if there were an issue with a post that required sort of a supervisory comment, I think probably the mayor would carry that comment forward.
All right, so thank you. Now, you've all heard of the five-headed boss. So what I want to avoid is that the chief posts something and gets a call from all 5 board members and is told different things. In other words, who is the arbiter of who are the post police, and when are they activated, and how does that happen? That's, I think, very confusing and needs to be spelled out. And we beat that one pretty good. Now, for example, what if Debbie, what if I want to post something on the village website? What would that scenario be?
I think the site administrator for the website is Debbie at this point.
Right, well, she is by resolution that was passed.
Yeah, so Debbie as a site administrator controls what's posted on the website.
So what would the scenario be, please? In other words, if I have something to post, what would I do if I wanted to post something?
You'd go to Debbie and say, I'd like this posted. And she's going to be responsible for checking to make sure it meets all the requirements, that's accurate, doesn't involve intellectual property, etc.
Okay, and so would she have to go to the board to get that approved as well?
No, the site administrator.
All right, well, let me ask you a practical question then. I understand that. For 3 years, at least, not 4 years straight, she and I have been splitting duties on the website because she's very busy. So I might post a meeting. I might post, like I posted the village, I posted the booth drawings. And can you imagine if, I think it's very, very micromanaged, but how would you deal with that? Would you then say, okay, Matt, you can't help Debbie out anymore. You can't put anything on the website anymore, because in effect, posting it takes seconds, but reviewing it could take 10, 15 minutes or more, which is actually a larger burden on Debbie's time. So if she asks me to post something because she's busy, obviously that would be accepted because she's the administrator. But let's specifically, I'd like to know right now if that would inhibit what I've been doing, which is posting on the wall, on the website. I also added a COVID-19 tab the other day, things like that. So are you saying that I would no longer be able to do that?
My read, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, my read is that if Debbie's comfortable with you doing that, she's a site administrator. And she's allowing you, and she's responsible for what's posted. Now, if there was something, and obviously you're going to check those elements to make sure that it complies with the policy, right? Which is, again, we talked about it, it's not inaccurate, it's apolitical, it's no intellectual property, all reasonable and standard conditions.
And all 5 people are going to have different views. But anyway, let me just say this. So let's say I post something. She's given me permission to post it. But I posted something and the board thinks it's inaccurate or whatever the criteria here that you mentioned, and she's responsible. Does she, in terms of her review or performance review, she's going to have to take the heat for a post that I put up that the board doesn't like or doesn't think meets the criteria? That doesn't make sense to me. And that's what you're saying here.
That the policy doesn't, just let's step back for a second. This is a standard policy that's used by many municipalities. The chief has looked at it and it's consistent with what he used to do. So we're not sort of reinventing any wheels here. Just stopping there. Second, the policy is like any policy is not designed to specify each scenario. The policy as stated says the site administrator is responsible for the elements. It doesn't talk about how that's going to be reflected in the performance review, etc. Each administration may treat that differently. That's outside of the policy. The only thing that's in the policy is what happens if something is posted that doesn't meet the standards. And it's not, Mayor McFadden or Chief Dave Conklin. It's anybody in any administration ever. So we're looking to a protective policy that again is standard to set rules and regulations or policies around how this should work. So in that scenario, if you post something and it doesn't matter if you posted or Debbie posted, if there's something posted that the quorum of the Board of Trustees feels is inappropriate, right? The lever that's in this policy, not the informal, way that it would informally work, the levers that are in this policy is that the site administrator could be changed or the site could be temporarily suspended or taken down. Those are basically, is my recollection, are the levers. Paul, I don't know if you've had anything to add about the levers.
Yeah, I don't think it's, I think that's fair. I don't, the Board of Trustees as an organization, it takes something of some true significance for it to get together as a board and do something about a post. But people who post just have to be mindful of what the requirements are, just like they do for every aspect of their job.
All right, so let me, another real world scenario. The website was put up without the board's permission, which I approved. I thought was absolutely fine, when he was interviewed and et cetera. It was expected he was going to have a Facebook page, but nevertheless, you guys stopped him from posting, okay? Because you didn't want him to post until there was a policy. Understand? And I pleaded with the board to allow him to post because we are in a health crisis. And, while you're crafting the policy and you've already spoken to him, even though it's not signed, he's going to abide by it and needs to be able to put information out for the public's safety. And you said, the board said, no, we think you should take the Facebook page down instead. Now, taking a village page down for 5 days until you put the social media policy together, to me is a strange message. I have never, it's just like, why is this taken down? A resident might say, I was reading it. Wait, what's going on? And in that case, I did not take the Facebook page down because you said we should. I made the decision to leave it up. Now, I did not override your request to him not to post. He hasn't been posting. So in this, now this resolution would mean that on this scenario, when you guys said, no, we want you to take it down instead, you would have taken it down. You would have voted to take it down. And I just think that under this new policy, there's so many things. There's so much micromanagement. At the same time, there's so much latitude for 3 members of a board to do things as draconian as take a website down because they're not pleased. And I'm very concerned about that. I mean, I'm just stating it for the record. I don't think this policy is thought out. And that's my on the record comment. In so many areas, it's just too vague and there's too much power to and the way the board's been running lately with this 4-to-1 stuff. I mean, I can't even imagine what would happen on the social media policy. So I'm just asking these what if questions. Do you guys want to move down? You said, Maureen, you said you're adding something today. I got it in this morning's mail.
Let me, if I can, just respond to that for a moment, because I would just say that in terms of taking the website down, what we are then left with in this interim period was a website that had informational content that was, I think, is less meaningful than a message that said, the Facebook page. I'm talking about the Facebook page. The Facebook page is temporarily unavailable and will be, in the near future. Because what you have there is basically no or limited content that is meaningful to the community, and you have a couple of posts of commentary on, I think it was on the police patch, and a comment on stump removal. So that's why the board thought taking it down for a short period of time, since there wasn't posting anyway, while a policy which is actually required to be in place for the comptroller was developed. So that's why the suggestion was take it down, because there isn't any posting there anyway. Period.
Why didn't you tell Debbie to stop posting on the main website until the policy was signed?
Because we try and do these things one bite at a time. We also have a bunch of policies and an employee manual that have been sort of in the works for a long time. This was the Facebook page came in front of us. It's something the chief wanted to do. We put it on the top of the list in terms of developing a policy for that, to get that going. You're right. I think the website should have a policy with regard to postings on there. Because if you look at the website now, it's partly because of the structure. We've been talking about that for a long time. It is, it's just a mess in terms of the ordering of information, what goes where first. You have to scroll down through a list of restaurants before you get into notices of meetings. I mean, the informational content there is just
haphazard.
A hodgepodge.
Yes, and here's my point, because I know a lot. I've always been advocating for a new website. You guys know that. I brought on a new website when I was mayor in 2005. I've been advocating for a new website for years in the budget meetings, etc. And that's because our current village website is not ADA compliant, and a variety of other things. Like, it's not that easy to use, and it's old technology. It's WordPress blog. It's very old. It's outdated. It's like an old Microsoft 7 that's not supported anymore. But my point was, and there you go. I mean, a lot of people like it and find it very informative. We do get quite a few hits every day, but these things are so subjective. I mean, that's why I'm concerned that the board's putting too much power in their hands over the running of these websites, when in fact we've never really had a problem in the past. It's not like, I mean, usually when you do this kind of stuff, it's because there's a swelling of people in the community that demand that you get a new website, or that demand you take the Facebook page down. One of the things that I think also that was harmful and sent the wrong message, as we discussed earlier, you asked Chief to stop posting. And so it was, I mean, I do know that other police officers and chiefs, and they check each other out, they talk, and they're like, why the hell aren't you posting? It's the COVID-19 virus, and yet you're not posting. And, oh, well, I'm not allowed to post. Look, this guy's run websites. He started the Monroe website. They have 5,000 followers. He knows what he's doing. He should have the opposite oversight than you're showing here. He should be able to post whatever he wants. He's the chief, and he should be able to pick and choose what to do. Now, your current policy says that the village website and the police website should not be in conflict. The village site has to be like where you put everything important, and that should not be competed with the police website. That needs a complete clarification, because I have no idea what you mean by that. And you also mentioned Code Red. So you have to give me before I vote on this, and before I would want to give my vote. And of course, I can always not vote today if you guys are going to pass it. But it's just, you're just inviting too much stuff, And in fact, I think, to be honest with you, I mean, I think that it says to the chief, we don't trust your posting. And he is an expert at doing this. Now, that said,
The
I really
material,
would like you to give me, excuse me, just 1 minute. I would like to know through examples now, before I consider my vote. You mentioned that the village website has one role for sending out information. The police department has a different role. They shouldn't cross. I think you said the village has to be the #1 place of messaging and branding the village. And the chief can post certain things and use code red other times. Can you please give me some specific examples of what those 3 differences would be based on real world information?
sure.
May I, before
Let
you
me-
answer that question,
just-
Paul, before you answer that question, I just want to point out 2 things. One, everything we did on this social media policy, including suspending the website, were done with the consent of the chief. We asked the chief, do you think it's good to have a Facebook page without a policy? He's like, no. So he was,
The man just started. What do you think he's going to say?
Mac, I would prefer if you did not interrupt me with comments that are, subjective and guesses. So the chief has been always honest with me, and I respect the chief, and I think Paul does as well. And he gave us his honest opinion about all of the issues. He brought up issues, he brought up concerns, we addressed them in the policy. So the chief is very comfortable from our discussions, and Paul can concur or not with that, but he's very comfortable with the policy as written. That's number 1.
Okay, fine. Let's move on then to the example.
I'm not done. Number 2, your agreement to allow the chief to put the Facebook page up failed to acknowledge or review the potential liabilities that this village could have because of a Facebook page. And those liabilities can be serious. They can cost us money. We cannot afford any liabilities, any additional liabilities in this village, nor do we want to. So as a prudent and cautious trustees, we felt that the page should be suspended. And that, again, that was in conjunction with the chief's agreement. Now, I am pushing this policy forward because I do think the chief wants the Facebook page as long as it meets these conditions. And that's why I recommend we do vote on this today. Now, I don't want to spend all afternoon going through scenarios that are clearly not addressed specifically in this policy, because it is a policy that does not address all scenarios. The policy is written as it is. It is, again, standard policy and an agreement with the chief's previous policy and what he knows in the village, and consistent with the template provided by Brian. So, Paul, you can go. You can disagree with what I've said, comment on what I said, or answer the chief.
Well, you said it directly to me, so I'd like to respond. I really don't. I obviously understand liability. I've been doing this quite a while for the village, and my policy is always to reduce litigation. I think it's very clear. But I really don't think there's a major potential for a lawsuit by having a Facebook page put up I'm talking specifically about the one we did. That to me seems completely unrealistic. And so I just don't see what you're saying about that. And then the idea that we can't have specific examples, that's really, it's like Nancy Pelosi saying, pass the bill and then you'll learn what's in it. It's just not appropriate for passing a piece of a resolution. And so, for example, I really need to know, I need to see what you've written and how it would apply in a real word scenario. I don't think that's too much to ask.
You've seen what is written, Mac. So I think that as it stands, it is written as it is written. I suggest we vote on it today because it is acceptable to the chief and is acceptable, I think, to Paul, but I'll let Paul answer.
Look, did you go to the chief this morning before you sent me that additional wordage that you wanted?
No, but I want to talk
Okay,
about
so why do you keep saying it's acceptable by the chief?
Because I'm talking about the policy as written that I've distributed. My goal is to get the policy that I have sent out approved today, and then we can make an amendment after we've discussed the additional addendum to this policy. But my goal.
All right, so I guess the answer is you're not going to give me any more real world examples. Is that right?
So let me, I was going to interject in there on that point, right? And so let's make sure, here's the language I think that's being objected to. The village website, supplemented by Code Red, remains the primary source of communication to the public. Social media postings may supplement these sources, but information material to the health, welfare, and safety of the public should be disseminated through the website and/or Code Red. So those are words, right? That's what we would do normally. The idea behind that, and this appears both in the materials that you circulated regarding social media websites and in the National League of Cities document that was circulated to trustees as well. They both recommend that important information, material to the health, safety, and welfare of the community be distributed through whatever channels the municipality has to distribute that information rather than a social media site, because lots of people don't have access to social media or don't use social media. So
well, they don't use the website either.
Well, more people use the website than don't use social media, and we've had people in our community who have asked for supplemental information because they don't use the website, and we have not yet been able to find a way to do that other than potentially through Code Red, which we use for very significant.
Right. Well, what we did last time for the survey is we mailed everybody, remember?
Right. So what we are saying here is just that, Chief, or whatever other website, whatever other Facebook page may be authorized, Chief, if it's really important to the health, safety, and welfare, coordinate with Debbie and get it on the website as well through whatever those normal channels are. Don't put a posting that is material to the health and safety of the public just on your social media site. Get it out there to the public in another way.
All right, no, I hear you, and I don't disagree. I'm sure the research said that, you know, health, welfare, and so forth should go on the main website or wherever the municipality wants. But let's just look at today's scenario. We've got a virus, a pandemic, and for the chief to have to be evaluated or you just actually made my point. There's so many subjective decision trees here. It's like, okay, the chief put something on, we think that should, you know, be on the main website. It's just mind-boggling. The micromanagement here is just insane. And all three of the five of us have to agree what should be on the police website or the village website?
There's nothing.
To me, it's just not. Look, let's just do look. I understand. Let's do the last your addendum, and then you guys can vote. I just, you know where I stand. Obviously, let's look at the new amendment and what's that going to be. Maureen, you want to go over that?
No, I want to adopt the policy as is and then talk about the amendment, because I am interested in getting this policy in place for the chief to be able to post whatever he wants. And just so you know, posting things as well, it has a burden, particularly in this pandemic, because you have to the things are moving, information is moving so quickly, you have to constantly update it. So, but nevertheless, I would like to get the social media policy up and running to protect the village. I am supportive of using social media. I've never said I wasn't. I just want to do that in a responsible way that is standard in the industry, in our amongst the villages, and that's what this policy is. It's not outlandish. It's not conservative. It is standard. So I suggest that I make a resolution that we adopt.
No. There's just hold your horses. We can get it passed today. You know, there's nothing going to crumble if we don't pass this until, you know, an hour from now, but we'll vote on it. But I do want to say for the record, it is not standard in the sense that every municipality uses this. That's just not true. Almost every municipality that I've looked at, they're all different. but that's neither here nor there. Before we vote, I'd like to go over the amendment that you put out this morning, because Brian's on the phone and it might be a good time to review this together. So, all right, I'll just start it off since no one wants to. Is this
Brian, can I make a resolution that we adopt the social media policy as it is?
Does this addendum affect the mayor's newsletter? Hello?
Are you asking me the
Hello?
question, Mayor?
Yeah. I'm wondering from the trustees who wrote this, if this affects my mayor's newsletter in any way in terms of regulation. So that's my question to Maureen.
By the way, the trustees did not write it. I wrote it. So that's why I would prefer.
Go ahead. Just
That's
answer
why
the question. Really, does it affect the mayor's newsletter? You can answer that question before we vote.
Are you asking me?
Yes,
sorry.
you wrote it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were asking Brian. I'm sorry.
I said Maureen, but I'm sorry that you didn't hear that. So yes, Maureen, does this affect the mayor's newsletter in any way?
The addendum to the social media policy addresses any village official that sends a broadly distributed communication to the residents of Tuxedo Park. So if the mayor's newsletter, is a broad distribution of a village official, this says you can. What I've stated here, what I've written down, is intended, and that's why I have not shown it to the other trustees, other than I sent it to Paul. I think I sent it to Paul Gluck and Alan, but I sent it late last night. So I'd like to discuss in this setting whether or not what I'm proposing makes sense and is too, whether it's too broadly drafted or I'm missing something. But the intent is to make sure that there's a distinction, there's no misunderstanding by residents of things that are one village official, whether it's the mayor, the deputy mayor, or a trustee, that the residents understand what the distinction between what is a opinion of one individual versus a board matter. And that's really a board a view or opinion. And that's really the only gist of this addendum, other than the fact that it lays out standards for what even a village official can say as respect to even their personal views if they use the village email and do it in their official capacity. Because again, I'm concerned about, and there have been instances in the past where liability could have occurred by some emails that have, not from this administration, previous administrations, that have been sent out. One comes to mind about a deputy mayor several years ago that was sent out as deputy mayor and could have caused us liability. So that's really what I'm trying to address in this addendum. But again, it has not been, I have no idea if anybody else thinks this makes sense.
All right,
So
no, I appreciate that explanation. That's very clear. The way I read it briefly, because I just got it this morning, is that any officer of the village, anyone on the board, or I guess any appointed board, I'm not sure if it's elected officials or not, but anything that's going to be sent out by an elected official over 10 words has to be approved by the majority of the board. Is that correct?
No, 10 recipients, not 10 words.
Oh, okay. So I beg your pardon. Anything that's sent to more than 10 recipients has to be approved by the board. Is that correct? According to this?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I can walk me through it.
Okay.
All right. Mayor's newsletter. I want to write a mayor's newsletter. Okay. And it's going to go to more. It's going to go to the entire list. What? And I click send.
Oh,
what does that mean?
Yeah. So this says, great, you can do that as long as it meets the standards. No content is inaccurate and incomplete. If you're doing it as a mayor's newsletter, no information is incomplete or inaccurate. No information causes a violation of intellectual property. There's a whole list of things, the same things that are in the social media policy, actually. You can send out the mayor's letter as long as you conspicuously and clearly state that is your opinion, not the opinion of the board. Unless the board says it is their opinion, and that you shouldn't, the mayor's newsletter should not have the banner that says Village of Tuxedo Park or any other banner or market that indicates, that would lead somebody to believe that it is official communication from the village board.
All right, so there is a board review process.
No.
Okay.
This,
So
there's
now you thought one of my last emails was not factual. Now, so let's just go back to that real scenario. All right, so you told me that you didn't think my last COVID-19 was accurate, and you told me, okay? And then you wrote a big letter that you read into the record last week, or I guess Tuesday. And under this new policy, what would happen specifically?
okay, and I don't think we said what you just said, but in the letter that we read into the record. But
You told me to cease and desist. So that's very serious language, and I'm wondering how that comes, what would happen in that scenario under this new policy? Very fair question.
Okay, yes, and Brian suggested that that we, in an inference, I took an inference from what his comments, that we don't have a policy, and I think we should have a policy, and that's why I'm adding this provision. So in the real world example of from the mayor's desk, you're welcome to send out that information as long as you meet those standards, and also you state that it's clearly and conspicuously not, you state clearly and conspicuously that it's not the board's opinion, it's your personal opinion, and you take away the banner that says Village of Tuxedo Park from the top.
Now, by the way, all right, so in other words, who decides whether it's accurate?
Ultimately,
The board.
well, you originally determine it, and then
All right, look, okay, I get it. Brian, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I got a question. Did anybody send me the current policy or the addendum?
No.
I did. Who sent that out?
I did last night.
Okay, but I assume I wasn't on it.
You were not on it. I can send it to you now. And again, this is Brian. This is a discussion that I'm trying to.
Yeah, I know, but you're talking about approving it, so I'm not comfortable telling you or recommending approval of something that I haven't seen.
Definitely think you should.
And I'm not sure that I want to do it live on a conference and then, say, yeah, it's good to go. Normally, I would look at it and review it.
So just so you're clear, what I want to approve today, is a social media policy that that we've sent to you in the past, and that does not include this additional paragraph. Okay.
The last one I have is March 23rd. Is that the one we're talking about?
Yeah, minor. It's March 23rd with a couple of minor changes. And I've just sent it to you. The minor changes.
The most recent version is April 1st.
Right. So it's the March 23rd version with the markups that I've included in the minor changes. So you have that now. And then we can always approve it subject to Brian's review. But I'd like to get that policy taken care of. And then at some point, I want to talk about, hopefully today, comments that the trustees may have on my suggested amendment on official village communications, which is not
in here.
No,
It
it's why don't you send it to him, Maureen?
I did. It's in the email, not in the document.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Got it.
So you want to discuss this next after your vote, and have Brian comment at that time.
We'll have the trustees give me their opinions, revise it, and then have Brian comment. And Brian's welcome to comment. I think he sees this problematic.
Well, he's here right now. Why would we want to do a version and then not? I mean, let him comment now so we don't all waste our time or have to go backwards.
Because I was listening to Brian, and he just said that he's not, he may not be comfortable giving online review, review.
No, I think he was talking about passing the entire thing as one package, and he hasn't had a chance to look at this part. But in fact, we're breaking it into two pieces, right?
That's what I was suggesting earlier, but I was
okay.
Yes.
All right, you have the floor.
Is it?
So I like to, Brian, you can look at that, and subject to the village attorney's review of the social media policy as presented to the Board of Trustees on April 2nd, I move that we adopt the draft social media policy dated April 2nd. Do I have a second?
Ask a question.
1 minute. We have.
Wait, Alan. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion? Alan?
Can I ask, can we, I think we're all confused about whether we have the exact wording and certainly whether Brian does. Are we permitted to adjourn this meeting and have it resume in a couple hours where we have a chance to look at exactly what we're talking about?
I would say that sounds fine. However, you've gotten the policy in the past several times, and I sent it out last night with the minor, and with one additional change in the policy, and it's all marked. So if you are uncomfortable voting, we can certainly adjourn it. But again, my goal is to get the ability for the chief to put the Facebook page up subject to this policy, because I think this is something we've been talking about. The chief wants it. I'm respectful of the chief's desires, and I'd like to get it adopted as soon as possible.
Why don't we take this? Why don't we tell the chief now in a resolution that he's welcome to start posting based on this policy, which will be passed. Give him a copy, and let's get going. Why do we? If the chief really wants it, let's call him up today and say start posting, and here's the rules you need to follow.
But you have to adopt the rule first.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a COVID-19. It's an emergency.
Well, let me say this. You don't have to. In other words, you could tell the chief, you passed a resolution and tell him with respect to his Facebook page, these are the guidelines he should follow. But this policy hasn't yet been formally adopted. In other words, you're pretty much just passing a resolution for his purposes, not village-wide. You could do that if you were satisfied with him just following these regulations that will be adopted. In other words, it's just not a village policy yet. Or you can just wait and adopt it as a policy, but I understand that you want to allow the chief to do what he has to do. That's one method
absolutely.
that you could accomplish that.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
it's just like, let's say, you know, I mean, it's just like giving the chief rules, not through a resolution or anything. Just here are the rules, and make sure you follow these rules when you post. I don't even know. I mean, I don't know why we would have him not start posting 2 weeks ago. I mean, that was my argument then.
your finger's been a while.
Can I ask a question? A couple things. I'm not a fan of social media or the Facebook out of principle, but aside from that, what I really don't understand is, to David's point, if all of a sudden we pass this or we communicate to the chief that he can start posting, if this information is so important, this resolution we're talking about says it has to go on the village website too. So is the chief sending it to Debbie, or is the chief authorized to put it on the village website, or how does it do? And I still don't understand why we have code red. If this information is so imperative, why isn't it being disseminated through code red, which is an emergency? And if it's not an emergency, why do we need it posted on Facebook versus the village website? I'm just confused on the process, the protocols and everything. And I think David's
both. I understand exactly what you're saying, Alan. I mean, first of all, code red has its own limitations. So, in terms of getting information out, because we don't have everyone's text, and not everyone has opted in. Facebook has its own limitations as well. I mean, you could put an emergency order on the fit and no one's checking it, and no one knows. So it makes perfect sense to put it on the village website as well. And that has its limits, unfortunately. But I think the distinction in my mind, Alan, is that he only should be placing police related information that he gets, whether it's from FEMA, whether it's from the county, the state, Homeland Security, just specific items that should fall under a police department in terms of communication. Now, if you want to put it on the village website as well, that's fine. I think that's great, because in fact, some people might not ever want to look at the Facebook page and vice versa. So there's nothing wrong with putting it on both, as far as I'm concerned. But that's how I see the split of information. Only police related matter, period. And if it goes on the village website too, great.
Right, but I guess, aren't we saying it, this legislation or this decree or whatever you want to call this is, it has to go, if it's posted on Facebook, it has to go on the village website too, or am I missing something?
No,
No,
no, no,
that's what it says. I think
No.
No.
no. The Facebook page is, if you want to call it, more of a public relations page. It's to build up a relationship with the community.
Yes.
So the differentiation, Alan, I would suggest is today, if we didn't have Facebook, today, if we had something really significant that we had to tell the community, something that was material to the health and well-being of the community, we would put it on the website. And all this requirement in terms of the duality of the sites is saying is, if there's something really material to the health and safety, welfare of the community, don't just put it on Facebook. Put it on the website too.
Right, but
Just having a picture of the police cars going to a site and doing an investigation, or some pictures of police activity, which is what you often see in these websites, on these Facebook pages. That's just a message to the community saying, hey, here's our police, this is what we're doing this sort of call. It's, want you to, the community's aware of that. That's sort of what the police Facebook page is very good at and is designed to do. But still today, I think the intent is, if it's material to the health, safety, and well-being of the community, get it on the website just like we would get it on the website today, using the same process that we use today to get it on the website.
all right, but I guess, sorry, my question or my issue is, in an event of an emergency or something catastrophic happens, that's why we have Code Red. And do we have protocols and procedures, or is it at the discretion of the chief or the police commissioner what should be and can be disseminated through Code Red? Because I think that all ties into this whole issue, doesn't it?
Well, this is the social media policy. I agree that we may want to think about giving guidance on Code Red, and maybe that guidance or whatever the rule is that the police chief gets to decide that, or the mayor gets to decide what goes through Code Red. I have no problem with that, but that's broadening what I'm trying to do today. I have a very narrow purpose today, which is to get a social media policy in place. This does not deal with, just to be clear, this does not even deal with the employees' use of social media at work, et cetera, or otherwise, which is another element of this policy that is standard. But this is a very narrow scope. And yeah, that's it. So
yeah, okay. So I guess my response is, and I mean, it seems like there's been a lot of dancing around this issue, but of paramount importance is, given the pandemic we're in, the police chief has not been muzzled with regard to communicating with the public with regard to public safety issues, because he has unfettered access to Code Red. So that he hasn't been able to post on Facebook is nearly a red herring, because if there was something that grave he needed to communicate, he has the ability to communicate through Code Red. Is that right?
Correct. And
okay.
That's cool. Thank you. Thank you, Alan, for making that clarification. So we have a resolution on the table. I have a second. Any other discussion before I call for a vote? Mac, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very confused, and I don't know, I can only speak for myself, not the chief, but you're saying that, I guess you told him, Chief, no publishing on Facebook until we get approval. But you also said, but you can post on Code Red?
I didn't address Code Red. His normal job description says he can post on Code Red. His normal, as a chief in another district, he knows he can post. Code
All right,
Red.
well, I would just say that he probably, being erring on the side of caution. I don't think, he never called or talked to me about Code Red, or we've talked frequently. It's not like, I just think it probably wasn't that clear to him. Maybe we concede that.
As a chief, he knows that. And maybe I would suggest maybe nothing has come to his attention that needs a Code Red announcement.
Okay, we can ask him.
Yeah.
And if you believe he knows what to post, we should let him post.
Okay, thank
Now.
you. Does that any other discussion points? Because I'd like to bring this to a vote.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
I'm done.
All
I don't
those-
know about everybody else.
I'm not sure where the line cuts between an official statement by the mayor or the trustees or anybody else and a personal opinion or where that line goes. I think clearly we have disagreements, and I think there ought to be a mechanism for those views to be disseminated. And I think they clearly need to be stated separately than a mayor's letter and convey the points the mayor appropriately can convey. And is that
so Al,
just a second.
yeah.
I don't use Facebook. I'm really I don't like social media. So I'm in a sense the wrong person. But Brian, is that distinction clear? But I think there is a difference between legitimate political views that people can express and official views that come out. And certainly I think the chief ought to have wide latitude and discretion to release code red, because that is by definition emergency. So he shouldn't have to be waiting for some clearance. Brian, is that clear? I guess is the question to you.
As far as code red, typically the chief, it's used for emergency purposes or important notices and things that are usually not questionable as far as, content and things like that. Beyond that, social media, things of that nature, you can control the chief's posting by telling him what's allowed and what's not allowed with some parameters. But the general question, the line is not that clear. There are a lot, when you come to officials and elected officials, there are a lot of things that can be said as an elected official that, may not be official statements on behalf of the village or the board that are permissible, that are First Amendment, protected speech, so long as it's really not, promoting your own business or things that are, shouting fire, the typical First Amendment things. But what you're talking about right now is the social media policy, which presumably, I don't know where this is going, because your handbook doesn't really apply to elected officials. It only applies to employees. So if this is a separate social media policy, then it's going to apply to Facebook and to whatever else you put out there. And you as the board can govern that speech as to employees. As to yourselves, it's a little bit of a different story.
So Alan, the policy that I'm asking you guys to, and Alan and McHugh, 1 second, I apologize. Let me just address Alan Barnett for clarification. The policy that I'm asking you to address has nothing to do with the village official communications, which is a separate discussion and language I just put out last night for discussion. I just really want to focus on the social media policy, which is not part of the employee handbook. It stands on its own. At this moment, we can decide it goes in the employee handbook or someplace else later on. It's a very limited 7-section document that I think is 3 or 4 pages that does not deal with this communication by the mayor's update or anything like that. So Alan McHugh?
I just to get clarity, I was just going back and forth with the chief. He did post once since he's been on our payroll, and he had Denise post for me last week regarding the work that Orange and Rockland was doing in the village. So he has used that as a method of communicating with the populace.
The website or Facebook?
No, Code Red.
Ah, okay, Code Red, thank you. Okay, any other discussion on this topic? Okay. Alan Barnett, okay? Any other discussion? Or I didn't want to cut you off. I just wanted to make it clear. Okay, so I'm going to call for a vote.
Would you like me to do that?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Gluck.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Alan McHugh.
Just so we're clear, what are we voting on? And with a proviso that subject to Brian Nugent's review and acceptance, is that what's being proposed?
Yes, sorry. The resolution was subject to the village attorney's comments or approval, I should say. We're approving the adoption of the draft social media policy dated April 2nd, 2020, that was sent out at 10:51 last evening PM by Maureen Cohn.
All right, so
And
you're including this, what you call the addendum. You're trying to put that
No.
in this vote now?
No,
Okay.
I'm not.
All right, okay.
Sorry, David.
Please. Sorry, Alan, no, please, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm just trying to understand is you drafted something 3 weeks ago.
Paul
You
and I
got,
did.
you and Paul, with feedback from the mayor and from the chief, you drafted something. Then David sent back a detailed response. You've incorporated some of those within this document, correct?
Yeah.
But it hadn't been vetted by Brian, and then there was some small changes that were put in last night. Is that what you're saying?
Yesterday, yes.
Can you just
Yep.
detail what exactly the change, the material change, the change that you made, just so we're all clear on this?
Sure, and if you guys have access to the document, although procedurally, I think we're in the middle of a vote,
Oh,
so I don't.
Well,
I don't
yeah,
know.
just, this is a point of order on the vote. You're saying a document April 2nd. I want to be clear. The one I have is April 1st. So is
Oh,
there,
sorry, April 1st, yes, I'm sorry,
Okay.
See, April 1st, sorry.
so
But
are we
really-
on the vote stage or discussion stage, out of curiosity?
well,
vote.
the vote is being called for, but I guess if there's further discussion, that's up to you guys. If you don't know what you're voting on or you have a question about it.
Well, I'd just like to make sure we're all talking about the same document. So we've agreed it's the April 1st document. Maureen, can you just read out what the change that you made was? Just so
Yes.
we're all crystal clear on that. Not that Brian's going to opine on this, but
Yes.
I just want to know
Back
the
to,
materiality of it.
Brian's
Sure.
taking a brief break while you read this, but I can read it myself. I'll be right
Yeah.
back.
So
Michael,
it's
I-
the
I-
change.
I can't- I don't know how to access my website, my emails and print out while on this. If I access that, it seems to me that I go offline this discussion. I'd like to postpone, I would like to adjourn this discussion and pick it up in a couple hours where we had a chance to read exactly what the hell we're voting for.
Yep, Alan, we can't adjourn because if we adjourn the meeting, then we have to call for another meeting and we have to notify the public and everything. It's not like we can we're going to take a pause and come back.
So what I can do to hopefully get this moved forward, Alan, is maybe summarize, and Paul, you help me summarize the provisions, and I can first, and then I can tell you what changes, specifically what changes have been made since the March 23rd version.
Yeah, I think I'm assuming we all read the March 27th version.
23rd.
Sorry, March 23rd version, which was your and Paul's in conjunction with the chief's work product. Then you incorporated comments from the mayor. And all of a sudden, there's a work product that came out last night. And all I'm saying is, I think it would be beneficial to highlight that either the changes are material or they're inconsequential with regard to this document, so we can either pass it or not. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay.
Or
So-
you think that's too tall an order? Is that?
No,
Not for, no. Does that work, Alan? That works, Alan?
Alan, what?
Yes, I'm sorry?
Are you asking?
Yeah, Alan, I'm sorry, Barnett, sorry. You can't see that I'm looking at you. Yes. Is it okay if I do that, or?
Me, Alan?
Yeah, Alan Barnett, yes.
I'm going to abstain for this vote, so I didn't need some, I'm going to abstain, so you got 2 votes so far. You want to, Alan, what, do you want to, McHugh, do you want to vote? I mean, how are you going to vote this one?
I would, as I've reiterated, I would just like it read into record what the minor, if they are minor amendments, if they're material, I agree. We abstain because nobody's had enough time to digest it. If they're non-material, and they're minor word issues, it's something totally different.
So why don't you read it? Because I just needed some time. Sorry, I'm going to, Dave, for
Maureen,
yours. I'm abstaining on this vote, so.
would you like me to read it? I have it out in front of me.
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is a difference from the last distributed version in the first paragraph, where it says the Village of Tuxedo Park Board of Trustees, the board understands and appreciates the need for the secure use of social media to enhance communication. It used to have the words collaboration and information exchange. Those 4 words were taken out. And it continues with improved government transparency, and the reason I presume those words were taken out is because there is not public posting, so there's no collaboration and information exchange. The next change was the addition of the word websites here. And it says, for purposes of this policy, social media generally refers to internet-based resources and applications that allow for the creation and exchange of user-generated content and enable users to disseminate or receive information, communication, or otherwise interact. Examples of social media include, but are not limited to, websites, social networking sites, Facebook, LinkedIn, microblogging, Twitter, Nixle, photo and visible and video sharing sites. And it goes with various other social media sites. The next change was in the paragraph that dealt with social media page content requirements. Item F of that says no images of residents can be posted without the word "their" was included. Their permission, excuse me. No images of residents can be posted without the word "there" was added, and then it continued with permission, just a language improvement. There is a paragraph captioned public comments. Since there are, the existing language was, since there are other ways to contact department heads via email or text, and there is a substantial burden to monitor comments, social media pages should not allow public comment, and the words were added unless approved by the board. In the next paragraph, social media administrators, the board shall designate the administrators, and a parenthetical was added, also referred to as a site administrator for each village social media page. I think that was just sort of definitional. And there was a paragraph added. Maureen, was this from at the request of the chief, the language he provided?
Which language? Oh, the Facebook? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. The language came from Fishkill, but it was after research done by the chief that he could not give the password. So yes, it was the Fishkill language.
I'll read it. Notwithstanding the requirements set forth in subclause B above, usernames and passwords will not be required for Facebook since administrators must use personal accounts to manage pages. Rather than providing personal information, the site administrator of the Facebook page shall add the village clerk as an administrator for the relevant page. The village clerk must have full access to maintain the site in the absence of the site manager. And I assume that's the intention there, is to ensure that the village clerk also can function as a site administrator, if you will, at least for practical purposes.
And the intent is that if the like the chief, for instance, were no longer the chief, that we have access to the Facebook page, because it is set up as the chief's, under the chief's personal Facebook account. So that was really, it was a technical issue the way Facebook is set up.
Trustee Gluck, not to add to the confusion, but are you reading from the Word document? Because I thought these were supposed to be the same, but they're not actually the same.
Yes, I'm sorry. The PDF is not, includes the additional language. I'm referring to the Word document.
And that's the one that's the subject of the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
It does not contain the language that we haven't talked about yet, which is official communications.
Okay, thank you.
So those were the changes.
So the only material change, as far as I heard, is in terms of managing the site and having the village clerk be the person who is, for a lack of better words, she's the Village of Tuxedo Park Police Department in this regard, but the chief is going to be using her name and her password to access the site. Is that what we're saying?
I think it's reversed because it's the chief who manages the site. This additional paragraph is essentially intended so that if the chief should depart, or so that the village has an ability to have the clerk have the ability to get into the site.
It's like,
Sorry, Brian.
Trustee McHugh, yeah, with Facebook at least, in other words, you log in as yourself personally when you maintain a page as the chief would, so we're not sharing his password and username on Facebook because that would also include his personal information. So what happens is on a page, you can add another administrator. So this policy seems to be saying you would add the village clerk as, for lack of a better term, a co-administrator. So she would be able to post or remove or edit just like the chief would be able to on that Tuxedo page.
Got it. Thank you.
okay, any further questions? Are you guys comfortable to proceed? Alan and Alan?
Mayor, you're on mute. I see the mayor's trying to talk.
Still on mute.
He's saying you're number one, Trustee Cohen.
All right, thank you. So far, the vote is yay for Paul, Maureen, and I think that's as far as we got. You said you wanted to abstain. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Okay, so that's McHugh.
As a principle, I hate receiving things the night before, but given the revisions are minor and technical in nature, I'm willing to vote for it.
Okay, and I am against it. Just to comment, I'm very pleased with number 1, overview, 6, adherence to laws, rules, and regulations, and 7, ownership, but I'm just not comfortable with the rest. So the ayes have it.
Wait, what is the rest when you say that?
Pardon me?
What? I'm just so I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing again.
Paragraphs 2 and 3, he said.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
No,
Gotcha.
paragraphs 1, 6, and 7, I think are very good, but I don't like,
Okay.
yeah, I'm saying no because I don't like what's in there other than that.
Gotcha.
So the ayes have it, correct? Was 1, 2, 3, yeah. It's Trustee
3-1-1.
Gluck, Cone, McHugh, I'm a no, and Alan's an abstention, right?
Okay,
Okay.
and may I bring up one other topic associated with this without going into the official communication discussion? We need to make our website, and I think Facebook as well, ADA compliant. I guess we have to push that off a little bit, Paul, because we were talking to New Windsor about and making a website ADA compliant. I understand from other boards that I'm on and that have website is just making it have a voice component. I don't know if I thought you were looking into that. I apologize.
I don't have the foggiest idea, to be honest.
I could speak to that a little bit. Typically, you'd have the ideal setup for ADA accessible for websites would be an accessibility menu. If you get a chance at some point, if you want to take a look at our website, it's fnmlawfirm.com, or just search Ferrick Nugent McCartney. I'm sure you'll find it. You'll see like a little man in a circle in the upper left-hand window, and if you at the upper left-hand of the home screen, and if you click on that, it basically gives these accessibility options, which include reading the page out loud, contrast, highlighting links, changing the text spacing. Now our site's a WordPress site. I don't know what the Village's is, but our web person, put this on our site to make it compliant. And it is kind of important because there are groups out there that are just filing litigation against companies and governments for lacking accessibility, bringing ADA claims, usually probably to get attorney's fees at the end of the day. But it is being done, so it is somewhat important to try to be in compliance with that. I don't know who manages your website, but that's one way we've done it.
So Brian, after an hour's conversation, you still don't know who manages our website?
I think it's close to approaching 3 hours, but I guess that part was only an hour. And speaking of that, I'm not going to be able to stay. I did not anticipate that we'd only be that far on the agenda, but we do have an executive session at some point I got to talk about on litigation, and I'm probably only good to 12:15, so I'm just throwing that out there.
David,
Okay.
should we adjourn to executive session whilst Brian's here?
Yeah, that's fine. Just give me 2 minutes. Why don't you adjourn us, Paul?
Well, Trustee
that's
Gluck,
fine.
do you know how to do the breakout room so we can do that?
Ah,
Are you able to make me a host and then I can do that?
I don't.
make him a co-host.
I don't
If you
think
go
I
to
could-
participants, you should be able to like right click or hit more and then
Yeah.
make me a co-host.
Right, or down at the bottom, you can put us right into a room.
Yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
can do that. Let me just say that there are, as far as I could see, no other participants here currently.
there are.
Let me
There are.
double check that.
Well, one
This-
is my executive assistant,
Yes,
who,
yes, there
you
are
know,
people on.
and there's
Okay.
Mary Greatser is on as well.
Mary's on. Oh, that's you.
Debbie, Mary, and Shannon are on. That's the people.
Yeah, so the breakout room, you can select just the board members to go in. The other people will be able to stay online in this room, so to speak, and then we would come back, just kind of like a real executive session. It's just virtual.
Mhm.
But like I say, if you aren't comfortable with it, you can temporarily make me the host and I can get us in there.
I don't think I can do that.
Yeah, you can.
I can?
Yeah,
Yeah, there should
absolutely.
be at the bottom, it says breakout rooms, or you don't have that option.
I have a breakout room and I have a breakout room not started. It says breakout room 1.
Is there a little number in blue, like says 9 maybe? On the where it says breakout room, if you click on it, there's one pop up and it shows everybody's name.
Let's see, breakout room 1.
Yeah, now you see, like it should show everybody, but
Having a sign. Okay, I can do this. I can do this.
All right.
yeah, so just assign the board members, and then board members, you may receive a little pop-up that'll say join the breakout room or something along those lines once he says it's created.
Barnett, Nugent, McFadden. I see Barnett.
I'm iPad 3.
And I'm your iPad.
Yeah, iPad 3.
I'm iPad 3.
Got it. Okay.
Have you done an invite?
And
Not
then
yet.
Is there like a join the room or take them to the room or something like that? Oh, here we go. You
I
got
have
it.
one, yeah.
I got one now, and now it should say join.
Yes.
So click on join.
All right, I'm back. I'm here. Paul, you here?
I'm here.
Barnett is not, and McHugh will be here shortly. And there's Maureen.
Confused. Okay,
Well,
I'm gonna-
Alan's here, Barnett. He's just not in front of his camera, but he's in the right room. We're
Okay.
just waiting for
Oh,
Chuck.
yeah, there he is. No, that's, oh, Alan Barnett, right. There's his lamp. Okay. All right, so who wants to take the floor?
Hold on, Alan's not here yet, and I don't think he can leave.
Trustee Gluck, you can actually, I think, there's an option under the breakout room to end that meeting, which will sort of force him back into the main room if he doesn't know how to
Okay.
get out.
Boo. Breakout rooms in progress.
I'm back.
One.
Okay,
Ah. You got a little food right here, Alan, on the corner of your mouth.
All right, so we need to set a date with regard to a local law overriding the tax cap. And we need an additional budget workshop. So that is the topical issues at hand for.
Can you do-
Before we go to that, I just wanted to point out that before we went to an executive session, because of technical issues, we went in without making the motion. So the motion was made by Trustee Gluck to go into executive session for litigation and employment matters concerning a particular employee, was seconded by Trustee McHugh, and all were in favor, 5-0. So that was the motion to go into executive session. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I texted Debbie both when we went in and when we exited. So she's good with regard to that information. So what is people's, or what is availability for next week, I guess, with regard to, we need 8-day notice. So it's gonna Monday anytime for people to do a budget workshop?
not at 8 a.m. I can't do it at
No.
8 a.m. I could put. Sorry, what time?
I don't mind.
Okay, yeah.
In
I
my
can't do-
view, this should be at a time, now this is going to set a public hearing, correct?
Yeah, we're gonna need a public hearing on that one, correct?
Right. So, Brian, just remind me, we have to send out the legislation draft. Is that right?
You already have that, but you would post it on the website,
Right. Okay.
and it should be, the
7
public
days.
hearing notice needs to be published 5 days before. the hearing.
Okay, 5 now. Okay.
5 calendar days or 5 business days?
Just 5 days, it says.
Okay.
So the way that works for Debbie, she says she needs 2 additional days to do that. So she says effectively, she needs to, the way she reads it is she sends it out and it's 2 days later, it's published. So that's how she gets to 7 days. If
Right,
you-
because it's 5 days, published 5 days before the public hearing. So that would be, whatever she needs, you have to add that on.
Right. So I would think the sooner the better, Monday.
So what?
Yeah, I'm
what-
open. I just prefer to do it not before 9.
Name the time. 10 o'clock?
Yeah, that's great for me.
Maureen?
10 a.m. 10 a.m. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Alan Burnett?
I have a 1 o'clock call coming up. We're gonna end before then, right?
Well, if you can resolve our budget shortfall before then, the answer would be yes.
I have a 1 o'clock call, so I gotta get on Monday. So if you
So
want to
you're
go.
voting for the tax increase, is that what you're saying?
There's no
Say I have
process.
a-
Answer his question. Will you please just answer his question?
David, is 9:30 work for you?
Yeah, does.
All right, so 9:30 on the 5th, agreed?
Yes.
6.
6, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, I have 1 minute past. Anything
All right.
else?
No, let's exit.
All right, do you want to adjourn now and then do a new meeting, or do you guys want to alone go through the rest of the agenda? I mean, if there's a, like on the boat stuff, if there's a split and I would have to vote, then let's table it. If there's a majority approving stuff that on the boat stuff, I don't need to be here.
I don't have anything. I think we can deal with anything additional in the budget workshop and the tax cap increase. Worst cases, we'll deal with it on Monday.
Okay, so I'm going to leave. Thank you. I'm going to leave the meeting now.
Just
And
2 seconds. Back, just two quick seconds. What I'd like to talk about when we get together on Monday, which is perfectly fine. But before that, we need an update. I want to get, my goal is to get the booth documents all done. Paul had some comments, so I don't know where they are with Brian. Brian looks like he's still on the phone somewhat. I'd like to
I'm
get
here.
to know where they are so that we can get that finalized on hopefully on Monday. So
whatever it calls for.
well, that's number one. Number two, I would like to discuss the official communication thing. We'll talk with Brian beforehand. Anybody has any comments, send them separately to me, and I can revise the language.
Brian may have to go, but if you want to do it now without me, that's fine.
Yeah, I gotta go. I'm already well past where I should have been.
Yeah, me
Yeah, so
too.
Brian, I don't know if you heard me about, just update us whatever on, about where the comments are that Trustee Gluck provided.
All right.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion, unless there's any additional comments, to close the special Board of Trustee meeting. It's 12:43 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Brian. Have a good
All
one.
right. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye, Paul.